Bettina. Councilman Phillips.
Here.
Councilman Casella.
Here.
Supervisor Percy.
Here. Everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Mr. Supervisor, if I can just ask for
Yeah,
a moment of silence for our
I was
call.
going to do that, but that's
Oh,
fine. Do it
okay.
now. No, go
Just
ahead.
figure while we're standing, if we could just pause deliberations for a moment to remember former Councilman Vincent Bettina, who served nearly 2 decades here at this dais and then went on to serve as highway superintendent. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I was actually gonna do that later too, but
Yeah.
Just figure while we're
that's
standing.
fine.
Okay, let's start the meeting, and do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. Next item is the motion to acknowledge the minutes of the October 13, 2020, meeting. Have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. I'd like to start off and really dedicate my comments this evening, following with the, silent prayers that Councilman Beal had, to say that the town is deeply saddened to learn of the passing of 3 individuals who dedicated their life to service and community here in Wappinger. And those 3 are the former Recreation Commission Chairman Hugh J. Marr, former recreation person, and Hughesonville Fire District Deputy Secretary Lisa Spinelli, and as we just had a silent prayer, former Superintendent Highways and Councilman Vincent Bettina. Just briefly, many of you probably are not, remembering because it goes back a while. Hugh J. Marr. Hugh J. Was lovingly referred to as General Patton by many of his friends during his 91 years, and is actually 30 years in service to the town, from 1962 to 1992. And well, we were thinking about it. I was just thinking of it for our council members. Wouldn't it be nice that we dig out some of these recognitions and have some display case? Maybe the historian can do it, because as I was preparing this, and Joey and I were talking, we don't remember many of the people that were recognized for their community service. And here's one I think that played a very vital role in the town. Hugh J. had, in his position as the Recreation Commission Chair, actually, as I dug into it, and also talking with his daughter Lynette, he was very much involved and responsible for setting up many of our parks, including Robinson Lane, and things that were also done in addition to baseball. For example, I didn't know they used to hold horse shows out in Robinson Lane and around one of the baseball fields and things of that nature. So, he played a very active role in not just our community, but around our area, because he was involved in church, in the Rotary Club, used to pick up the mail from the ferry as it came across, the river, at the days to bring in the Beacon and Glenham, Fishkill, Hopewell Junction, and so forth, the mail. So he was, also involved in Vassar Brothers. I think Joey, he's in the Dutchess County Baseball Hall of Fame, in the Sports Museum there. And so, we really want to recognize him as having played an important role in our town. And he passed away peacefully on September 29th, and it has his daughter Lynette and his dog True North to remember him, as we all do. So please, if you see Lynette around, she's been very good to the town. Give her your deepest condolences. Lisa Spinelli is also another one that we continue to grieve for her passing on October 18th. And she was only 49 years old. It's never good to see someone pass, but certainly at that young age, and with four children, and Ryan and Taylor, Alexis and Billy, It's very sad to see her go. Of course, her husband, Bill Spinelli, who is well known to many of us, also is surviving. She was really very much a dedicated mother and wife, played a very active role, particularly in the nursing community in this area, various functions that she served over her short life, time, including also Riverdale Senior Center. She loved, to help, people, as we all know. She was also a member of our recreation committee, very dedicated. If you went out to various town events, such as Community Day last year, you would always see her around. And so we will very much miss her, as will everyone else, and we hope that also you remember her and her family in your prayers. And then, as Councilman Beal reminded us, we lost Vincent Vinny Bettina, last week on October 20th, and he succumbed to a relatively short illness, I guess you could say, as illnesses go. And we are really saddened to see him leave, and particularly for Councilwoman Bettina and her family. And as I mentioned during my talk of the town, you've noticed that Councilwoman Bettina has not been here, but that's the reason. She's been really dedicating her every day, every minute of every day, to trying to save her brother. He was in cancer treatment down at Sloan Kettering. And so we continue to grieve for them, and our prayers go out to Angela, also to Vinny's fiance and Susan, and many others who crossed his path during his long career, starting as the coach at Beacon High School and being very active there, and then starting around, I guess it was 1996, as I recall from the history, as our councilman for the 2nd Ward, representing the community in which he was really spent almost all of his life, and really trying to look after the people that he really cared about. Since his passing, I think all of us have come to learn a number of things that we never knew about Vinny, and the activities that he was involved in, through the community that he never bragged about. And I think that's one of the aspects of him that we do come to learn more about during this aftermath. So as a member of our board, as a member of the Board of Education of Beacon, he is the president of the New York State Builders Association, and many other activities in which he is involved. And his last public service was as our highway superintendent, first appointed and then elected by the community. We really, on behalf of our councilman here, Senior Councilman Bill Beal, Councilman Chris Phillips, Al Casella, our councilman sitting to my left, Town Clerk Joe Paoloni, Superintendent of Highways Michael Sheehan, our town justices Wolfson and Kitchen, the legislators, including Joseph Cavaccini, Lisa Paoloni, and Donna Bolner, and many others that have come across this past. We will miss you, but we will remember you, and we hope that you're finally able to rest in long deserved peace, and please take care, and we look to see your memories all around the town. So thank you, and again, thanks, Bill, for the little silent prayer at the beginning. Would any other councilman like to say anything? You've known him perhaps longer than I have.
Well, I'll just say that the reason why I asked for a moment of silence as soon as I stepped up here is I just had a moment of reflection of Vinny sitting next to me for almost a decade.
Yeah.
And Joe Paoloni, we shared this board together up here on this dais for many years, and Vinny was very animated and involved, and never held back with his passion for this town. I'm certain that no one will disagree with that way of putting it, and we're going to miss him. But I think it's good to take a few moments to pause and remember an individual who also went passed too young.
Yes.
I believe he was 67.
That's correct.
And It's certainly unfortunate that we lost him so quickly. I mean, we knew he was ill, but unfortunately, I had no indication that there was any imminent life-threatening situation going on, and it really was a shock to me to hear that, because I'm sure we all, wish we had another conversation with Vinnie. He had an institutional knowledge of this town that many don't have, and certainly from me personally, I share my condolences with Susan as well as Angela and the Bettina family. He will be missed.
Thank you, Bill. And we still have outside in our lobby the little memorial where you may come in and sign your name, make some comments to Vinnie and the family. That will be deeply appreciated, and then we will pass it on to Councilwoman Bettina. Just briefly, a topic that I guess is probably even more on our minds than it has been is COVID pandemic. But I think, again, our county continues to do a really fine job in addressing this. I think the dedication, the hard work during the lockdown continues to pay off. As we've seen, the 7-day average has risen slightly to just under 1%, 0.99%. The tests continue to grow. It's up to around 213,000. At our last board meeting, it was 194,000 tests. So those are being done over 1,000 a day. Active cases has risen a little bit from 125 to 150, but overall the hospitalizations has actually dropped down to 9, at least at the October 24th, the 2 days ago records, and 24th, and that was compared to 13, I think, at our last board meeting with the hospitalizations. The deaths, we have seen, unfortunately, still a small increase, but any increase is very saddening to all of us. It's at 165. The town of Wappinger active cases has dropped from 17 to 12, but this is a fluid state. But we continue to ask everyone to follow the 3 W's, which is wash your hands, wear your masks, and watch your distance socially. We continue to remain open and continue to see a strong number of folks coming in to the town hall. I think we're now up to around 7,500 visitations since we opened in early July. So I want to thank you all for your patience and dedication to following the rules. And we're going to do our best to continue to provide full services that we have been. And you'll be hearing some more further of our deliberations about that as we discuss the budget during the rest of the evening. So I'll end my comments there. Again, please stay safe and remain well in the days that are coming ahead. The next item is really a public hearing, opening of public hearing. For the first item is a resolution setting a public hearing on proposed benefit assessment rolls for special improvement districts and special improvement areas for fiscal 2021, and to hear any objections. I have our tax assessor here. He'll speak, just introduce it after we open it. So do I have a motion to open the public hearing on this resolution?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passed. Christian Harkins, would you just come up and briefly summarize what's involved in this year?
One of my duties is to create the special district benefit unit rules. I usually create them, I give them to the town clerk. They're available for inspection if someone wants to make a challenge. We do have one challenge. I sent it out to everybody on email last week. But basically, we have a prescribed methodology for assigning benefit units. That's how we do the, not the operational maintenance, but the capital cost for the districts. So any bonding that is out there that has to get paid back, we levy that on their tax bill, and we use the special district benefit units to divvy up that amount on their bills. So I don't think, was anyone coming to look at it this year, Joe? Or? No. Yeah, that's usually what the answer. So, it's a big book. I created and put them all in there. Most people end up, we do our benefits in hundreds, so most people get 100 benefit units because they have less than 2 acres and they're a single-family house. So that's just a standard. If you have more acreage, or if you have a 2-family, or if you have commercial properties, those calculations are different. But a majority of the people are gonna end up with basically 1 or 100, as I call it, because we do them in hundreds. So, but we should probably go, if anyone have any questions, or, so, but there is that one challenge that we did
Right.
receive back in August. It's a little early to receive them, but the guy filed it, and so we took it and hung it on the wall, and so we better remember this when it comes time, so.
Christian, could you just explain to the board what the formula is for single-family houses on more than 2 acres?
Right, so if you're a single-family house on 2 acres, 2 acres or less, you end up with 100 benefit units. After 2 acres, it's 0.2 benefit units per acre after that. So if you had, say, a 3-acre property, you'd end up with 1.2 benefit units, or 120, and it would go up from there. So, the challenge that we have, Mr. Ostro, I believe he has 9 acres of property. So he ends up with 200 and, I wrote it down somewhere, 240, I think, benefit units. And he had made a challenge saying that he thinks the property has wetlands, it's landlocked, it's heavily wooded, and owners are on a fixed income, never intended to actually clear the area, and the water service was forced upon them. They didn't really want it to begin with. So, but they're on Stanger Court, so then when we extended the water line down there a few years ago. But again, the water line is there for them to use, so if they ever had an issue
Right.
with their well, it is
Right.
available to them. So, just because you don't hook up to it, you are in the district, and you are responsible for paying the taxes for that district. If you're not using it, there's no operation and maintenance cost for you, but you are in the district, so there is a benefit there for you.
So since this is the public hearing, then we would enter this as an objection, Jim?
Yes.
Into the record officially?
And because there's an objection outstanding, I think, I'd like to discuss this with the board in executive session.
Okay.
And we can adopt the benefit assessment role on a later date.
Okay.
Do I need the name of the person who objected? Did I not send it to you?
Here, Joe,
Oh,
I'll give it to you. Do we need to officially list it? I assume.
Yeah,
so.
sure, yep.
Yeah, so you can put, scan and attach, yes,
It's already been, I'll forward it to you, Joe.
I have it right there.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I'll scan it.
okay.
So do
Oh,
you
I mean,
plan
I
on
have-
adopting in a different meeting? Or after the executive session?
A different meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, so we will then table the motion,
Right.
the resolution later on. But
Right.
right now, thank you, Christian. Any questions for the other board
No, but
members?
we would adopt the benefit units before the budget.
Yes.
Yes.
We have to.
That's
Yes.
always my thing. that you
We
should
need
have-
to do that.
Because that's kind of what you budget on.
You're
So you
right.
should have your benefit units set.
Right.
Before you create your,
Exactly.
pass your budget.
Right.
So, okay,
Okay, thanks.
thank you.
Are there any other objections to be raised at this point in time during this public hearing? If so, please come up to the podium, identify yourself and your residence in the town of Wappinger. Seeing none, do I have a motion to close this public hearing
So moved.
for this
Second.
item? All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or objections, abstentions, I mean, nays or abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. The next item for public hearing is a resolution setting public hearing on proposed budgets, O&M charges, water, sewer rates, and rents for special improvement districts and special improvement areas for fiscal year 2021, and to hear any objections thereto. Do I have a motion to open the public
I'll
hearing?
make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passed. Mike Trepper, do you want to just briefly summarize, and then Jim can, anything with respect to this item? And we'll come back to your budget later.
Okay, well, I put the, hold on, let me call. I put the O&M budgets together. I'm not sure, I'll be very honest with you, I'm not sure what Frederick did with the rates, but my budgets, I presented to him back in August. There were modest increases in all the water and sewer budgets, and they were there all to keep the plants and the equipment not only running to get us through the next year, but also to replace equipment where necessary. So it goes on for a long time, even though many of the sewer districts are old and run, and the DEC is hounding us down, we still have to keep them running. If you were to go to some of those sewer plants are 50 or 60 years old. We don't do a lot of capital replacement to them. We do almost all our repairs through the O&M budget. You know, we keep things up and running, and we'll see that also with the United Wappinger Sewer District, where we maintain the collection system and all the flow goes to tri-municipal. If you look at the budget books I've sent you, those books are not only very helpful in knowing the expenses and the costs, but they're also very helpful in outlining the flows and the status of the equipment, the age of our equipment. You know, we have some very old pump stations. Dick, did you want me to get into this now, or?
No, get into it. You're first on the item when we come to the budget, so I just thought, just briefly explain the O&M charges.
Okay, so we go through the O&M, and we look at the costs for the equipment, electricity, chemicals, all the things you need to do, and then we also budget for equipment replacement. Some of our sewer pump stations are 52 years old. They're tin cans down in the 20 feet in the ground. With this year, we've got a couple of big projects where we're replacing, going down and cutting all the equipment out, and it's like $30,000 or $40,000 per pump station to rehab them and put them back into good condition so they can hold up for another several years. And we go through United Wappinger Sewer, Wildwood and Midpoint Park. You are looking to abandon the Wildwood Sewer Plant. You have a grant for the government for that. But I still put monies in the budget to keep it up and running and to meet all the limits set forth by the DEC. They issued us a new permit there that, we can't meet. I've put those parameters. When you look at the budget book, I've graphed how the effluent meets against our Speedies permit that the state gives us. And it also shows you the flows. So Wildwood is one we're looking to take offline, and when you get a pump station there, the costs for O&M to operate the pump station will be a fraction of what it costs to run the sewer plant, but then you'll have the fees to go to tri-municipal. So I don't know where all that washes out. Midpoint Park, that facility runs well. I know Al's toured it, and but we're over the flow a lot, and that's another one where the state has changed the Speedies permit for us to an old plant that we can't meet, all right? The new limits, we just can't meet it. Fleetwood Sewer we have, right now, the DEC is evaluating our permit, which means they're going to change it and make it stricter. They're not gonna come back and say, okay, that's a good thing. They're gonna make it stricter, and when they do that, we'll be in the same boat at Fleetwood as we are with the other two other regional facilities we operate. And even though those plants run well, they meet their limits that they have now as far as quality, sometimes the quantity is over. In my opinion, and I'm the person who takes care of them for you, I think it is the best for the town to regionalize, and I think I've said this for several years, to regionalize the sewer. I know it's expensive, I know it's, there's some hurdles you have to go over, but certainly operating these small plants is a problem. And what'll happen is, we'll have a development boom, and then you'll have a developer wants to come in, and there'll be no room, and then he'll want to build another small plant. And then you'll start the cycle all over again. And I guess this is more advice than technical things, but this is something that you have to be careful with.
So when you put your budget together, do you look at, a year, 2, 3 years out so that you know that you're gonna have to do replacement parts?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. When you look at our water budgets, all right? You have 11 wells in the town. You will have 11 wells. And part of the O&M process is, they're all gravel pack wells, is to rebuild one of those wells and have it cleaned out, not rebuild it, but flush the aquifers out. It costs about $25,000 a well, but we do 1 or 2 a year. So every so often you have them all done. Otherwise, the volume of water you get out of them is depleted and you can't use them. The pump stations, we do all that work with the pump stations, replace pumps. You know, instead of overhauling them, we'll buy a new one and then rebuild the other one and have it as a spare. Very rarely have I come to you over the last 47 years, which I've been here, and say, which is a scary number in itself, and say, you know, this equipment, I need a new clarifier, or I need a brand new pump station. Because we try to keep the equipment we have in good condition so we're not replacing it capital-wise. And it's not good anyway, because sometimes this equipment, as stated, as technology changes, you can do stuff and put in better equipment instead of just waiting to replace it. Now, probably I don't know when a good time to bring this is up, but I've also put a memo. We have, I think it's, let me just read this so I can tell you what we have. In the United Wappinger Sewers, we have 14 pump stations, okay? 9 of them have permanently installed generators. So when the power goes out, generator automatically senses there's low power, the generator comes on, runs the station. When the power comes back on, the generator shuts off. Years ago, we had very few generators in the town. The health departments and the DEC started making generators mandatory equipment for new 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But of concern of late is it seems like even though, you know, we're in 2020, we have, seems like more power failures and longer durations when they do go out. And we have 2 big pump stations that I have to have the guys, we have some portable units that we have that they tow out and hook up in the middle of a storm or a hurricane or snow. And these generators weigh 5 or 6 tons apiece. It's not a good situation. And when we have a condition like we had just back in August 7th, I mean, that windstorm lasted about 3 hours. It knocked power out in the whole town, and then the whole town goes out. So not only are my guys trying to, or my firm is trying to react to, we're towing generators all over all at once. And I would like you seriously to think about, for the Kent Road pump station and the Sherwood Heights pump station, putting permanent mounted generators in there with automatic switches. One's got 50 horse motors in them, the other's got 25 horse motors in them. It just makes sense in 2020 to operate like that. It's a $135,000. You know, I put the proposals there for the equipment. I think it would come out of, I think you have a fund balance in the sewer
Right.
districts for United Wappinger Sewer. It just makes sense to do it. You know, though the same firm put generators in at Russet Lane, Pippin Lane, and Royal Ridge Sewer several years ago. He services the generators we have now. It makes sense to me to do it, and I could do it through my O&M agreement with the town, if so desired. So I would urge you to consider that. I think it's important to get that done. So that's the thing that's outside the O&M budget. Read it. If you have any questions when you look at these budgets about flow graphs, I mean, I was so happy this year with our United Wappingers Water. We were there in late June and early July. We were averaging 1.7, 1.8 million gallons of water per day. We were keeping up with it. I was getting very, very nervous, but we were keeping it up with it pretty well, and the people could read that, you know, they had to be a little careful and not go crazy, and then the numbers came down, and we went through it. We got through it okay, and we're gonna have 3 new wells next summer at this time, okay? What's going on at Hilltop is a very good thing, but we do have a good water supply, all right? And you do have a lot of people in the town that need good water. I would like to see us, I think, to offset some of those problems of me whining when the peak flow rates go high. I'll use that word, whining when the peak flow rates go high. If we set our rates so that the people who used more water paid for it at the time, and then you could set your rates so you could conserve water, you know, a conservation rate.
Yeah, as we
situation.
discussed at our last
Yeah,
week's
and I know-
consultants meeting, we are looking at the
You
conservation
know,
pricing.
setting rates is not a real easy thing. It's pretty, you gotta be pretty careful, because you gotta raise the revenues. You know, when We have filters that are very expensive. Every time I change filters, which happens quite a bit when you use a lot of water, it's $15,000 a it's a change out. So you have to make sure we still raise the revenues to run the water plants, but we might keep the people that are, if you think about it, we use 1 million gallons a day in February, and we're using 2.4 million gallons a day in June. That means we're putting 1 million plus millions on the
1.4,
ground.
sure.
Which I know people, deserve that, they pay for it, but I think if we could surcharge them, so if I'm living conservatively and you're watering like crazy, that you pay for that. And I don't think our rates do that effectively.
What is our maximum capacity right now with all the wells online, and how much additional capacity do we have?
We have to work that out with Tim, to be honest with you, Al, because you have to look at, when our wells are all done, and then you have to figure, well, you gotta, there's a little question about maximum capacity. Is it every well running 24 hours a day? Or do you say our biggest well is out of service, and then we wanna run our wells 18 hours a day? The number will be it'll be like between 2.2 and 2.4 million, I believe. It's just a matter of how we shake that out, and then, because you don't want to list your maximum capacity and then,
You don't want to exceed it.
Well, we have a maximum permitted capacity from DEC.
How much?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but DEC sets a permit capacity
'Cause what I'm trying to figure out is if we're
based
running
on
it-
a well out, and, so there's some criteria.
So what I'm trying to figure out is we're running it, probably max is around 2.4 million gallons. If you add the new 3 wells on, does that give you additional capacity?
Yeah,
So that
and-
gets you up to 2E, 3. I
Well,
get it, it's hard to
I was
calculate. 'cause
actually
the-
factoring those in somewhat,
Okay.
because one confusing issue with the wells, with the Hilltop well field is, you've gone without the potential there for several years. Even though you're gonna get 3 new wells, you're not gonna change your taking permit that the DEC is giving you. The
Okay.
DEC has issued you an 800 gallon a minute taking permit, and at this point, we're not applying to change that permit. We're seeing where we are with, and we may ultimately end up doing that, but we're gonna see where we are. The new wells look like they can do better than that. The caution I always have with the Sprout Creek wells is they are affected by drought. So you have to, regardless of what the taking permit is, we can't overestimate what they are, because as it gets drier, they don't produce as well.
I was just thinking about the Montclair Apartments, how we're going to give them some additional capacity. Does this help them at all? I mean,
It certainly is, and I think having more water in the town is a really, really good thing, but I think it's gonna create a lot of decision-making by you guys about where that water goes. Does it
Okay.
go to Montclair, does it go to Route 9, does it go, you have several miles of pipe where the residents aren't in the district and can't hook up unless they have quality issues. You have Old McFarland Road, you have Old Hopewell Road, so you have a lot of things there you have to be careful about.
thank you.
And the other thing I didn't mention is, the state has passed all the PFO and PFOAs, so we now have to sample every well 4 times a year. We have 11 producing wells. It increased your sampling budget by about $30,000. But we did our initial testing. The supervisor had asked me to do some testing long before it got to be a regulation. Our wells, all the wells had very, very low detects in them, below the very strict 10 number that New York State has set.
Do you have any idea long-term, because like you just said, we're getting applications to tie in off of Old Hopewell. It seems like a lot of those wells are failing, and that whole 9D corridor, we've had that conversation, that it's not doing well.
Right.
Do you have any long-term thought about that whole area?
That whole area has been a problem for a very, very long time. I
Right.
mean, I considered Tall Trees wells in that area. I considered Fleetwood wells in that area. Hudson View, apartments down behind the stadium is all part of that. Montclair Apartments is part of that. And all of them get their water now from other sources. So the wells that are along there, are not, I wouldn't bank on them.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, there's generations of challenges through the Houstonville area, and again, much of these infrastructure investments should have been made in the 70s when there was 90% reimbursement from the feds. And there are reasons why this town didn't pursue those, which I disagree with, but at this point, I think post-2021, or whenever the water becomes officially available from the New York City DEP infrastructure, I think there are conversations that need to be had, you know, and as you said, decisions that need to be made, but we have to keep in mind, you know, the residential locations that have been waiting
Right.
for decades
For a
for
long time,
water
sure.
should be prioritized.
I agree.
Right.
You know, and I'm not saying this, I think supervisor and the board here should be pretty happy, proud of themselves to where they put the town in a water situation now. I mean, you've done the right thing. You know, I think you have to look, and as time goes on, no immediate concerns, additional storage to go with your production numbers and those things, but you certainly have put yourselves in a good position with amount of water you had, because for years, the town, we had no water, so.
On the other end of the coin, we also need to look at the commercial corridor. I know the supervisor has been looking at this. You know, the ratables that we attract on the Route 9 corridor are going to be based on what infrastructure's in the ground, right? So one of the largest commercial locations near my residence is the former plant depot.
Yep.
And I'm always trying to keep an eye on what's happening there, and having an informal conversation with Rob Bayakowski, who has that property right now. He basically put it into perspective and said, listen, based on the fact that there's no water currently there, no sewer currently there, that really limits the you know, the options for the town. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've had limited options on ratables for as long as I can remember.
I think, you know, now that we're, well, first of all, CPL, my request has, you know, dusted off some of the older studies, and then looking at it anew from the expansion potential, part of what is motivating us even more so. And we had a, you know, a good meeting the other day, the consultants, myself, you know, Barbara Roberti, Bruce Flowers of our planning board, you know, with the new owners of Alpine, you know, and, you know, that whole complex where BJ's is. And so we're looking at opportunities now for their development, and that can very well spur, you know, going down, you know, Route 9. And I have talked with Rob, I've talked with actually all the major, you know, owners, you know, the businesses down Route 9, including Splashdown, who's not in our town, but they're interested in buying water from us if we were to work that out. And they bring in huge containers, you know, truckloads each day. So I think we're getting close. Once the Hilltop is done, I've asked Mike and CPL to give us an estimate, you know, really it's akin to what Councilman Casella has asked of what is our capability. Then we will be, and we discussed this with Mr. Haran, just notifying basically New York DEP that we have this capacity based on their intake, which is very little. We believe that there should be no longer any need for us to reserve for them based on where we are right now. But we're going to go through that process probably at the very beginning of the year once we get a, you know, better handle on those wells. Then that enables us during probably the first quarter of next year to be talking more about these types of projects, as well as other areas. You know, for example, along Old Hopewell, Wheeler Hill, you know, area where so many wells have failed or are not in good shape, and as we brought on 3, you know, private residences on a tenancy basis. So we'll be having further, you know, discussions with respect to that, and I think, and Mike's been very much involved in that process so far.
I'd also add, based on the board's direction, we've applied for grant funding
Right.
toward the Atlas well field for additional filtration
Mhm.
requirements as things might come about, and as well as Fleetwood Sewer and Midpoint. So, you know, we're looking ahead at trying to resolve some of these things as well, so see
Yeah,
where the
and-
grants stand.
You know, and as we look ahead, and we get the wells done, and we look at some of the things, we can't ever lose sight of the fact the stuff that's in the ground is sometimes 60 years old. It's not, you know, and I know I give the supervisor credit because most of the time I call him, it's a water main break, and he still answers the phone. He doesn't, so I mean, but I laugh, you know, it's not funny, but you do have, and a lot of these failures we're having are things where some of the old clamps, some of the old tapping saddles have just worn out and disintegrated. So it's hard to have a capital project to replace water main pipe, you know, but we can work with Tim's team at some point and look at strategically repairing some of the main valves in, so when we do have water main breaks, we don't have as much people out. The other day, we had a water
Yeah,
main
big
break on Wildwood Drive. Now, it's the old Atlas water. The system was designed to pump the water up from Atlas and feed it that way. Now we feed it back from what was Pizzagalli. So the valves are old, so in order to do our repair, we had to shut off the entire Atlas district. It's a lot of people, a lot of pipe to regenerate, a lot of pipe to, so those are some of the things that, as time goes on, and it is difficult to have a capital program to replace water main pipe, because it is just not
You
easy.
just don't know.
You don't know, but valve replacement is something that we need to look at and evaluate. So we don't have, when we do have problems, we don't have as vast amount of people out of water.
That's a good idea. It's a good idea.
Yeah. So,
While Mike's up here, any other questions with respect to his budget? Might as well just, you know, if you have
Yeah.
anything else, Councilman, please ask him.
No, I mean, my experience is, Mike has been conservative as much as possible with these locations. And, you know, if we have a catastrophic failure, we have fund balance to cover catastrophic failures. We hope that doesn't happen. But at the same time, I did make a note here when we get to the point where we discuss capital expenses. I think your point on those generators, something we should take a look at.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement. Mike and I have reviewed it. We can talk about
Yeah,
that further.
Absolutely makes sense to do that.
yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, trying to toe out, and, you know, I've asked that CPL survey the areas where the pump stations, because I would have to put a fence up and put them in and secure them, but you just can't, the way it's set up now, I can't leave them out there, like when they're forecasting a storm, I can't drag them out there and leave them there, that's insecure, somebody will either vandalize it, or we'll have an issue on our hands, so it's, like I said, it's 2000, as my wife says to me, it's 2020, you have to buy new clothes. You guys might have to buy some new generators.
And further to that, Mike, you know, the councilman and I, you know, we've also discussed about, is there a need to beef up, you know, kind of the security of, you know, these pump stations, of the, you know, the sewage plants and so forth, just, you know, because of the nature of those facilities and the
Yeah.
importance to the town.
And we've looked at putting cameras at our well fields, and we can, that is something we're gonna try to do in next year's budget, is put, and this isn't really my forte, but I'm trying to keep, because of the water system operations and the cybersecurity that goes with it,
Right.
I'm trying to keep the internet out of the water facilities. And the security systems require, a good one requires the internet, but they do have some smaller, inexpensive ones, just so you know what's going on and you can put the signs up. We've been very fortunate that we haven't had trouble. We only have a few pump stations that don't lock now, and or don't have a gate around them, and we would remedy that with the generators, so.
So as you think about the 2 generators that you need this year that you're looking to do, is there any down the road that you think you might have to? Because I'm sure there's more than just 2, but 2 is probably more of
There's
the
five
immediately.
There's 5 altogether. 2 of the other ones are smaller ones that I would just do through my O&M budget.
Okay.
So I could, you know, do that through the O&M, through the numbers that are already approved. And I don't want to get into this tonight, but at some point, years ago, the town put sewer in Four Fields Court. They put a pump station. Four Fields Court is a private road off of Kent Road, and they did it. You remember? I mean,
I don't remember.
remember 25 years ago, 20 years ago?
Before my time.
Yeah, and they put a pump station in and a generator, nobody ever hooked in. So we have a generator there, we have a pump station there, nobody's hooked in. I mean, I don't know what you do about that, but I mean, that generator I could use and unhook it and put it someplace. I can't put it at these other big stations. Some of the equipment
Maybe
I
the
could
smaller one or
I could
something.
reuse. We have some pump stations that need to be replaced. If
Right.
you read in here, I could use that pump station to replace it. I don't know how you go about doing that. That would be a Mr. Haran situation, but we do have, the pump station's never been, we check it, make sure that it is operational, but it's nobody's ever.
Never
hooked
using
in.
it, right?
Nobody's hooked in.
Yeah.
Mike, each one of those water and sewer pump stations is considered critical infrastructure under Central Hudson's definition. So I'm going to take a look at, when I get to work tomorrow, to make sure that we have that listed within our database. So we should have a conversation because those stations should be prioritized for power outages.
Yeah, and when we always call them in, we do call them in as those, as that. So I'm hoping, thank you for doing that. I'm
Sure.
hoping they have that because that's important.
Bill, as far as FEMA money, or is there any grant money available? I know when you mentioned critical infrastructure, I know there's some, resiliency planning.
Hazard
mon-
mitigation.
Hazard mitigation. Do you
Yes.
think that would qualify for?
It may. Hazard mitigation funding is money that becomes available after other declared disaster funding has been fulfilled and there's money left over. So the challenge with hazard mitigation right now, being that this is another unprecedented year of disasters, will there be money left over? These types of critical infrastructure improvements may be eligible for hazard mitigation funding, and the town of Wappinger is an eligible participant in that program, so I can take a look and.
Because I know that, GSA, federal GSA has specific purchase programs available for generators and things like that.
Yeah.
For hazard mitigation. So if it comes time to buy it, we can probably look at that source.
Right.
Because they do have, discounted prices, through the federal buying power. And we would qualify for hazard mitigation under that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take a look. The question of funding, just like on the state level, the federal level is also up in the
Right.
air.
And I have discussed with Sean Patrick Maloney's office, I have a good relationship with them, and so they are keeping a close eye on, as federal funds come out, to look
Well,
at
Any
our
member,
infrastructure
any
needs.
member item that,
Yeah.
member items would be more of an expedited funding situation, so there might be a little more flexibility
Yeah.
with member items.
Right.
I mean, again, we're in the middle of it. This pandemic is I believe, the first time there's been a nationwide state of emergency presidential declaration.
Right.
So there's a lot of unknowns relative to federal funding, but we'll take a look.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Since we're still on the public hearing portion, do we have any other objections or comments with respect to the O&M charges and rates? Seeing none, do I have a motion to close?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes. We'll move to the public portion of the meeting. Do I have a motion to open the public portion of the meeting?
Move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. If there's anybody in the audience that would like to comment about any item on the agenda after this item number 6, please come up to the podium, identify yourself, your name, and your residency within the town. Seeing none, do I have a motion to close?
I'll make a motion to close.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes. The next item will be the continuation of our departments, talking about their budget proposals as have been submitted within the tentative budget. We just had water and sewers, and thank you, Mike, for covering 2 things with that good presentation. The next item will be the town clerk. Mr. Paoloni, would you come up to the podium and talk with the board? Do these lights dim or come down? You know,
They're right
it's
up
now,
there.
it's very glaring with the other ones off, at least for me, I'm sorry.
We used to be able
My
to
older-
dim them, but now I think they, I don't know if they're dimmable.
Volume,
Okay.
41, 42.
Hike.
How do we disable that? That freaks me out.
Okay, Joe, thank you. Thank you for turning the lights off.
I've been your town clerk since
Oh,
2000.
jeez.
Oh, look at this.
Prior to that, I was a councilman for 14 years, starting in 1998. At the town clerk's office, we're in charge of approximately 29 to 30 different processes ranging anywhere from agendas to vital records. Many towns are trying to enter the 21st century. We've been there for 20 years. It started when I was a councilman purchasing the systems that allowed the prior clerk and up till today to do certain things with the town records and the town meetings and minutes. We have complete town meetings on video as far back as 1998. We have scanned documents in Laserfiche in a search engine that covers meetings and minutes back to 1875. We have an automated recycle center database and access which produces a permit in seconds, which used to take 5 to 10 minutes. We have complete town meetings and agendas as far back to 2006 on video that are timestamps so that you can search for anything during the meeting by simply clicking on that portion of the agenda. We have initiated and implemented live and rerun TV on 2 cable franchises in 2014 when I started, until 2019 when we acquired an external vendor. And we have vital records back to 1874 in a database that searches for birth, death, and marriage records. We're just adding a portion of the work. So it's been great to be able to serve you as the town clerks, and thank you very much.
Now that's impressive.
Performed 8,402 transactions, which amounted to $622,193 worth of revenue with 2 employees, and at the same time doing 29 different processes. In 2020, given the 3-month shutdown, the town clerk's office processed 6,252 transactions, handling $414,721 worth of revenue with the same 2 employees and the same 29 different processes. In 2020, we scanned thousands of records into searchable Laserfiche engines. We purchased a new postage machine. We've built a new resolution/minutes database with enhanced searching capabilities. We've moved and processed thousands of records from Cornwall stores to the new EMS building records room. We've initiated online credit card purchasing of the recycle center items and dog license renewals. And we've initiated expedited credit card purchasing over the counter. Let's take a look at some total revenues and activities. Transactions. Total transactions in the year 2019 were 8,402. Many of those were small dollar transactions. Total amount to $622,193 worth of revenue, which we pointed out on slide 1. Not to mention the 64,000 postage parcels that were processed. 2020, year to date, we've had $414,721 worth of revenue with 6,252 transactions. And we've only processed 37,528 postage to date. That's 9 months to the end of September. First, let's look at the non-revenue activities and transactions. Legal notice 28, 2019, 44 year-to-date 2020. Bonds processed 2 each year. Local laws processed about 6 in 2019. So far, we're up to 3 completed, but we're working on the 4th right now. Database designs and modifications 3 in 2019, 2 in 2020. Resolutions 215, 2019, 162 year-to-date. Agendas and minutes 25 and 19, 20 in 2020. Handicap permits issued and scanned 658 2019, and right now we're at 390 end of September. Garage show permits 42 in 2019 and 19 in 2020. 362 foils last year and 200 this year. Dog renewals and letters sent 502 in 19, 648 this year. Target revenues, excluding COVID-related and recycle. Dog licenses and renewals, $5,578 worth of dog licenses and renewals. That's 718 of them. 2019, 508, 2020, generated $4,000. Dog violations processed, 2 of them in 19, none of them this year. Hunting and fishing licenses, $3,031 worth of revenue, that's 103 of them, 36 this year. Peddler permits, 4 this year, $950. 4 last year, and 4 this year. Last year it's 950, this year 700. Games of chance, $325, this year only 25. And then recreation dollars processed, none last year, and 4 this year for $1,775. Now let's look at the revenue transactions related to the code enforcement office. Total transactions on code, 2,168. Last year, 1,474 this year. Last year, we generated, or we processed from what they generated, 512,000, half million, a little over $500,000, and 323,000 in 2020. 417,000 last year from the building department, 25,000 for fire inspection last year, 41,000 in revenues last year for planning, 7,450 ZBA last year, and 21,498 for zoning last year. This year, it looks like it's pretty much half that, 1,268 for building department, $250,000. Fire inspection is pretty much flat, 118 of them. Planning, 21 of them for 30,431. CBA, 6,400. Zoning, $12,359, or 50 in 2020. Finally, the recycle center related revenues. Garbage tickets regular. Last year was $31.40, this year $16.20. Garbage ticket senior, 11,000 generated, 7,100 this year. That's 718 transactions. Trailer single axle, 3,000 last year, 2,700 this year. Double axle is not pretty flat, 2,300. Freon, 3,400, or 228 of them last year. This year, $2,115, or 141 Freon permits issued. Single use, $1,100 processed, 74 of them, and this year $600 worth, or 40 of them processed. Annual permits, anyone being under 60 years old, 684 of them last year for 34,000, and this year 546 for 27,000. And then the annual permits for senior is 1,077 handled for $32,000 generated last year, and 1,013 handled for $30,394 this year. Last year's revenue was 89,000. This year 72,000. The number of total activities regarding recycle center last year was 3,555, and this year it's 2,735. And before we get to the town clerk budget, we finally we have the daily closeout of the books. We close the books every day and process the records. 260 last year, 180 this year. 622,000 processed last year, 414 is what I was slide 1 this year. We also monthly processing to the external entities, the New York State Department of Ag and Markets, the New York State DEC, Games and Chance. And they significantly have less games of chance this year. The DEC permits, DEC hunting and fishing, 2,863 last year, 103 hunting or fishing licenses, and this year we're down to 36 with $1,570 worth of revenue. Remember, this went to the end of September. Hunting season begins picking up in October, so those numbers are a lot higher now. And as far as the monies processed to the New York State Ag and Markets, we processed $959 last year to them and sent $681 to them this year. And as far as postage, again, 64,000 postage units processed. And this year we processed 37,528. As far as the town clerk's budget, last year was 177,169. Was adopted this year. We asked for 178,324. It was cut back to 164,383. Okay, here are, now the reason for that,
Thank you.
we asked for, reason for the 11,000 or so decrease.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
You really stepped up your game, Joe, I gotta say.
Primarily that decrease in what we asked for was, I had asked for a small raise, $2,000, and that was pulled out, and and for the deputies as well, $2,000 for each of them. And the third item was the town clerk equipment, where I asked for $5,100, and the reason for that, which was pulled out, was to build a counter to eliminate people always stopping at our window, you know, as the receptionist. Because in addition to the 29 to 30 processes, we also have to direct people all over the town as they stop. And they do as well when they come in the side doors for, you know, at the assessor or other places. But and in many towns, they have a counter there where you can just walk into the clerk's office or read the signs that are out there and then go where you need to go. So other than that, pretty much my budget is a usage budget. What I need, I use. And some years it's over, some years it's under. But that's basically the delta between what I had asked for and what it is now. This is Angela. So if there's any questions, pretty straightforward. I guess the real point was that we do a lot in there. And sometimes people don't realize what the town clerk's office does. And it's a lot. Many days you'll do 15 or 20 of those 30 processes, and many days you may do all 29 of them.
I have to say, that's very impressive.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Joe,
Nice job.
just to refresh my memory, in addition to you, you have 2 full-time deputies, correct?
2 full-time deputies, yes.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
allowing the elected town clerk to speak.
Of course. Good work on that presentation.
Yes. Really nice.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the Justice Court. Judge Wolfson, would you please come up? Thanks.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
First, Judge Kitchen apologizes for not being able to be here. She just had a knee replacement operation, and so she's not too mobile, so you'll have to just deal with me. The main reason I wanted to talk to the board was to try and discuss with you the possibility of changing the board's position about letting the courts use this main meeting room with regard to vehicle and traffic operations. As you know, when the COVID crisis started, everything was shut down. Little by little, the Office of Court Administration has authorized us to resume limited operations. And at the present time, our controls are that we cannot have more than 25% of the capacity of any room at any one time. When you understand that the court is the judge, court's clerk is there, there are court officers there, that's about 5 or 6 people before we get started. And the capacity of the courtroom is such that we can only have about 8 people in at any one time. As a result of that, we have not been able to process most of the vehicle and traffic infractions, and we now have, at this point, pending 2,875 unprocessed traffic violations. Were we be able to use this room, we could increase that capacity to about 24 people. And the way that it's been established by the OCA is that personnel would contact and make up a calendar and phase approximately, if we were to use this room, 24 to 25 people every 15 to 20 minutes, so that in a period of about 2 or 3 hours, we could cover over 100 cases. That would allow us to greatly break down the backlog that's presently pending. Again, the Office of Court Administration has set up the method for having courts, which requires, A, anyone entering the building to have his temperature taken, to fill out a form with regard to where they have been over the last 2 weeks, whether anybody in the family is ill, and then they are processed through the other normal security processes. The OCA cards that we have gone through training and are trained to do that, and do that in all of the courts in the area. So I would ask the board to consider whether or not we could use this room on Tuesday nights, as we have in the past, so that we could greatly reduce the backlog of cases and bring things up to date. Just to give you an example of what has happened, before the pandemic, we were handling about 400 or 500 cases per month. In April, we handled 9. In May, 62. In June, 82. And then starting in July, August, and September, we've had some modicum of success by using the ability for the town attorney to contact defendants by mail pursuant to OCA authorizations, and sometimes obtain pleas in that regard. And we've done some of that. But it doesn't cut into the backlog gets worse. And so if there's any questions, or if anybody has any comments they'd like to address, I'd be happy to answer them.
So right now, are you back on your normal schedule?
No, we are, right now we're on a normal criminal schedule, because the Office of Court Administration has dictated that criminal defendants are not to appear in court except for arraignment and disposition. So whereas before you would have a regular calendar and they would return every week or 2 or 3, they don't come in except initial appearances and dispositions, and we stagger them, so we only have 2 or 3 in that room at any one time. And the actual calendars run anywhere from 20 to 30 per night, starting at 5, and we end up about 7 to 7:30. We've had virtually no vehicle and traffic calendars, because we have no place to put the people. And that's the reason why I'm suggesting that we use this room, so that it will grossly increase the capacity and try and work on the back end. We have had small claims trials, because we've been authorized to have trials without juries. And so again, in the room, there would be the judge, counsel for each side, and the witnesses, and that's all. And we've had a few of those.
So what's the maximum number of people you can have in the courtroom right now?
About
20.
About 8,
Oh, wow.
25% of the capacity.
Okay.
So
So,
it should go without saying that everybody has to wear masks. That's
Right.
giving them
so having this room available would be like a staging area for?
No, what we would do is, if we could use this room, we would have calendars of approximately 100 to 125 a night, staggered at 24 every 15 to 20 minutes. The first group would come in. They would be separated down the hall. They would meet with the town attorney, as they have in the past. When the town attorney has resolved it, they would come into this room, and then it would be just a continuous cycle, and then we would take the pleas, or whatever the arrangements were, have the trials, and then proceed from there. But we can do that if we have the capacity to do it. We can't do it without. This would also allow us to have the town attorney use our courtroom as a place to meet with the people who have traffic violations. In the past, supervisor has let us use his conference room, but that, because of the COVID, that's too tight and that doesn't work well.
Right.
But courtroom is big enough to have the town attorney in one spot and either the attorneys or the defendants in the same room and have discussions with them.
So what are the hours that you have now? Are they 6 to 8, 9 o'clock? Do you have hours, set hours that you?
No. It varies from week to week. What will happen is the calendar itself runs criminal calendars run about 60 to 80 cases. However, as I indicated earlier, the Office of Court Administration, who dictates everything that we do, has mandated that people do not come in except if they're on disposition. So there's a call-in sheet. People, or attorneys call to the court and say, our case is on for Tuesday, but it's not resolved, and they're told, then it's adjourned to such and such a date. These are the criminal cases. Those that are resolved come in, they're given the time to come in. So you will have 2 or 3 people come in at 5, 2 or 3 at 5:30, 2 or 3 at 6, 2 or 3 at 6:30, and so on.
So what I'm trying to figure out is, you said if you had the extra capacity here, you could get 125 in per night.
Yeah, what we would do is we would have.
And what do you have? What do you have?
25 per about 20 minutes.
Okay, and what do you have today for capacity in a smaller room? How many do you, a night?
Well, we haven't had any real vehicle traffic cases because we can't have more than 7 or 8 people in there.
So it's-
And when it's the 7 or 8, you have to count the judge and the court clerk and the court officer. That leaves you with room for 1 or 2 people.
So, relative to after court is over, what is the process by which the court is disinfected? Is there a special disinfection process?
But these are the 90% of the people are the same people that come to this town board meeting and that come to everywhere else. 90% of the people that we have, especially in the vehicle and traffic, are local citizens.
Right.
And it's this, and they are checked before they come in, temperature taken, as I indicated, fill out a questionnaire, asked about their health, they come in, they're processed, and they leave. Now, I didn't notice if we have them here, but in the courtroom, we have a sanitizer for people to use as they come in and come out. And most of the courthouses, courtrooms have a sanitizer for people to use.
Yeah, we have that.
There's no.
And we also clean up the room. So one of the issues, Councilman Beal, I've repeatedly asked the judge, is to provide a written plan on how he would be using this. This goes back for weeks, and we haven't gotten it. I expect it would be the responsibility of the court to clean up this room, to sanitize it after it's done, just like what we do normally with, Steve Frazier and his folks. We do have sanitizer that is provided, and we do, wipe down, regularly. So one of the things I requested of you through, Cheryl Haight, is to clean up this room, to have a plan of how you're going to adopt it, also in conjunction with our town protocol. I have not received that, Your
Well,
Honor.
whatever cleanup would be the responsibility of the
That
town.
should be the responsibility of the court, to clean up.
We don't have the personnel.
Yes, you do. You have, a staff of 5 people in addition to the judge. You have, 3 full-time and 2 part-time people. You have plenty of personnel.
Are you suggesting that the personnel would be the people to sanitize?
We use our staff to clean up the rest of the town. We have staff at the, front desk. This is what I've been requesting of you. Also, I had suggested before that you could be increasing the number of people here by staging people outside in the cars, bring them in as they are ready for the hearing. You have not done that, Your
That's
Honor.
what we would like to do.
Well, I don't see why you couldn't be doing that already.
Because it's the difference between 2 people and 24 people.
Not if they're sitting out in the car, you bring in 2 people at a time then.
Yes, you know how long that would take?
Well,
100 counts?
it's better than nothing, which is what I've been saying. May take a few more days.
Well, listen, so obviously, these are unprecedented times, so I understand you've been asking for a plan.
Yes.
I have no objection to using this room as long as there's something in writing that indicates how we're going to proceed in a COVID environment, how the room is disinfected or who's responsible for that should be indicated in that plan.
Right.
I don't think that's something the town board needs to sit here and deliberate. But at the end of the day, Your Honor, I understand this is a challenging time to be holding court, period. I was on one of the OCA conference calls at the very beginning of this, and they did not make it very easy. You were on it too, Supervisor.
That's right.
OCA did not make it very easy. In fact, at that time, they had no opinion on plea by mail at that point, and now I understand that they have opined on that. So that said, there needs to be some sort of a compromise and solution in order to process these cases, because it's obviously not fair to the individuals that are waiting for disposition of these cases. So I have no objection to utilizing this room or utilizing any other large space, whether it be inside or outside, as long as we're following the CDC best practices and the OCA guidelines or regulations, and as long as we have a documented plan that the supervisor and the Justice Department in the town agree to, I have no objection.
Okay, well, I would
Neither
ask-
do I.
I would ask the supervisor to have his staff provide us with what you do with regard to sanitizing this room, and then we can
You know,
adopt it, because.
Look, I've asked repeatedly, sir, for your written plan of how you do it. You have, I've given to Cheryl Hay, our town protocol, which this board reviewed and approved
So
as
you
far
have
as
a
process
protocol
and
for
procedure.
cleaning
Yes,
the room?
and the main thing, you've had that for a while, okay?
I
You've
haven't-
had it for a while. Your office has had it. I don't know if you've actually read the
I
darn thing.
haven't seen your.
But, well, you know, I mentioned to you in the past, you know, you have a staff of 5 people
We have
that.
3
you-
full-time
And 2
part-time.
part-time, yes. You're confirming you have a staff of 5 people. It seems to me they can be processing this and doing this as we do with also a limited staff to do it. I've mentioned this before. I bumped into you a while back and also said, please present me a written plan. So as soon as you do, we can consider that,
Fine,
okay?
that's fine.
Thank you.
So I guess the question is, when can we expect to get a plan? When do you think you have something put together, Judge, so we can, you know, make the arrangements for you to be able to use the town hall here, this particular area?
As soon as I take a look at what the supervisor said we had, as to what you required with regard
Can we
to
set a-
sanitizing, then that's easy.
Can we set a 2-week time period? Is it 2? Okay.
That's not a problem.
And I'm not expecting a town board ratification of the
No,
plan. I think
that
this can be
doesn't-
done during daytime
That's
business hours. You know, this town has had to kind of blaze a trail with a lot of this with COVID. I think we've been a leader as compared to other municipalities. We've been having in-person meetings, we've had an open town hall, we're following all the best practices, and we're being safe. So I feel confident that the supervisor and the judge and his staff can work out a fair and equitable plan that follows those practices and also meets your OCA requirements.
So we won't require another town board meeting.
No,
No.
I think that we need to expedite this solution.
I think as long as the protocols are, you know, reviewed by the supervisor and approved by the supervisor,
Sure.
there's no need for it.
Right,
Right, no problem.
right.
Because we like to get that backlog, you know, cleaned up a little bit if we can, and I'm sure you would too.
Any other questions that anybody has? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item, Frederick, I guess, the accounting.
Thank you very much. I will present the accounting department budget for 2021. The department is 1315 in number, and the personal services are the dot ones, equipment, dot 200, and then the contractual 1315.400. Looking at line 1315.100, there's a proposal of 1.25% in 2021. And the other line, 1315.101, is for the account clerk typists. These are Teamster union employees, and I think the proposal on the table is currently 1.25% for 2021. The other line is 1315, 104, another account clerk typist, same amount. And the last one on the personal services, 1315, 199, which we reduced from 8,320 to 3,500 because the person who used to utilize that comp time went to another department. But we do pay, there's a provision for vacation pay of about 10 days for each of the Teamster Union employees, and any other additional time over 35 hours that they may spend working in the accounting department. I don't have anything under the equipment. What we had last year was for 2 computers for the new hires. Under contractual, we have actually reduced. The total adopted in 2020 was 34,485. Right now it's 34,300. We have reduced the mileage line from 500 to 250. Supplies stable. Postage we have reduced from 1,250 to 1,000. Copier list we have reduced that to 1,300. Paycheck, this is the new payroll program.
Is that a fixed contract?
Yes, we have an annual, contract with.
Okay.
Right. So we pay for processing the payroll on a weekly basis currently. There's also charges for time in a box, which is the machine that the employees use to when they clock in and out. That machine, there's one here and one in the highway. And then we have the accounting software, contractual amount there, 1315,406. And lastly, this training line, which has stayed the same.
So on the training line, if I look at it, right, if you go back to 2018, you spent roughly 1,500, spent about 1,000 in 2019, and you're only about $1,400 now. I guess I get it. Things are different this year with COVID for the training, but do you really need 2,500?
Yes, I do, because I have 2 new employees. They haven't been trained. They haven't gone for anything. So we'll start to use that line next year.
And you're okay just going back to the controller equipment? I mean, you spent, quite a bit of money in this year, about $1,700, as you stated before, and you have nothing in for this year, so you need no equipment.
No, we don't need any equipment,
Okay.
no. Maybe I can also talk about the auditing line, 1320.400. That's for our external auditors. There's a proposal to increase it by 3,000. And then the last line, 1324.1, which is for a software for valuing the other post-employment benefits other than pension.
So Frederick, we've been using the same accounting firm for some time. And, and that's what, at the rate of 38,000 that we have budgeted in this year. Are you satisfied with that? I don't think, Bill, correct me if wrong, we've had an RFP for that,
Yeah.
and where we've done it for other, organizations. Do you feel that they are, doing a good job? Because, I'm not sure, from your experience, what you
Who is
see.
it, Linda Hannigan?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, so accounting best practices say that we should switch accounting for,
Right.
or,
Yeah, we had to do that in the
Auditing
corporate world.
firms.
Al, you probably had to do it in the corporate world too, change your
Absolutely.
accounting every 5 years.
yeah, and I think it's a healthy approach to RFP the auditor on an annual basis, and we should probably do that for 2021.
That's my thinking.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Frederick, when they do these audits, they're only auditing, you know, different parts of they're not it's not the entire town operation, correct?
Basically, just the financial
Right, but I
and
mean,
some
it's
of
not the
internal
entire,
control.
I mean, the ones that I've read, they focus on different areas to see if they can identify.
It's not like the, state audit,
Right.
controller's office.
Right,
Where
right.
they did recreation, for example, this
Yeah.
year, or they do the
Did-
town clerk.
Do they do internal controls in their audit or no? And do we typically do those?
Yes, there's a report on internal control. But it's the internal control that they come across while doing the financial audit. It's not like very dedicated.
Don't they have to do everything in order to certify the results of, so you would think maybe they select a few specific
Yeah.
items, but really gotta look at the overall because they wanna make sure that everything is good. They may focus on a couple.
Yes,
But-
they do.
Right.
But they have to do the entire thing in order, for the CPA firm to go ahead and audit it and make sure everything is, accounted for, et cetera.
Right, they do the whole thing globally, but they dig into certain
Yeah, sure.
areas
They'll-
specifically.
I
So they
mean,
take specifics every year
Right.
just to kind of.
Again,
Correct.
it's the terms of the audit arrangement, so a lot of times what they'll do is they'll do just a sampling in particular areas, rather than go, in depth, so.
Right.
I mean, that's typically, what you see, but if there's an issue that needs to be looked at in
Right.
further detail, then that's something that's,
So did they ever look at our bank statements and see how much money we have in the accounts? Because and I brought this up much earlier in the year, but we seem to have a lot of money all in one bank. And we should really take a look at, because of FDIC, everything else, making sure the money is in a couple of different banks. I know it's more convenient to
we
put it all in
actually
one, but
have, we annually, or is it annually or biannually, we get security agreements over and above the FDIC restrictions.
It's,
So
monthly.
we're not bound by, New York law requires that there's separate depository bonding requirements that guarantee our deposits. So for every deposit that we have, the banking institutions that we deal with provide separate
additional
guarantees
insurance guarantees? Okay.
Yes.
over and above FDIC
Yeah, because
requirements.
there's only 250,000, we have certainly a lot more than $250,000 in the
Right.
bank, so, it's always been kind of my concern that, again, you got all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, no, we're not limited to the FDIC, so,
Okay.
and, so that's under the New York State.
And Frederick, you have added
Finance.
another bank, right? And we had, remembered the briefing, what is it, not Pauline, it's,
Yeah, recently we did move our capital funds
Right.
from, our main bank to another local bank, just to try to,
I mean, the
balance.
only requirement is that, under New York law, the bank has to have a business office in Dutchess County.
right.
So, that's a requirement for a
So back to the audit,
deposit.
I have no objection as we move into 2021, we RFP,
Right.
which I think is a good practice. I'm not dissatisfied with the current
No.
firm, but I think that having another firm take a different look, different perspective.
Certainly good practice to
Yes.
do that.
Healthy.
That's why I mentioned
Yep.
it, I think.
Yep,
it's-
I agree with you.
Relative to the banks, I believe during the reorg meeting,
Yeah.
the banks are identified, and any specific
Right.
information can be discussed with the controller.
But Frederick and I did interview one of the local banks, I've just forgotten right now, PCS or something, which, came in with actually a good presentation, local presence office, Dutchess County. And that's what Frederick said, to try them out, had transferred some of the capital accounts to them. So he's looking at those issues.
right.
Very good. I don't have anything further.
I don't need.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Frederick. And thank you for all the support for everyone else that's dealing with the budget issues. Okay, thank you for wiping that down. Barbara? Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So
And
instead
welcome
of-
to the torture chamber, no kidding.
It is, it's a classical holiday, so this is just a double header. So we'll start with the fire inspector, which is account 3410. So instead of going line by line, I'm just gonna bring up lines that have either gone up or down, unless you have a question.
No, go ahead.
B, 3410.
Okay.
So there's really no change until you get down to 34,400B, 3410.400B. So that's cell phones, pagers, so we're adding $100. That has gone up over the year, and right now, we're up to 576 as of October, and it was budgeted this year for 600. So I've added $100 to that to cover an increase next year. The next line is 3410.401B, which is gas, and I've reduced that by $200 to $1,000. We're just not anywhere near 1,200, so I've reduced that. And then we have 3410.405B, and that's with supplies. Right now, the only thing that we have is $181, so I reduced it by 100 from 500 to 400. The next line is 3410.406B, which is the CD annual. I reduced that by $400 from 1,900 to 1,500. Last year we budgeted for this year, and the few that we have automatically update next year, except for one, so we can have that reduction.
Is your new software system up and running now?
They're
Or
just
where are they?
finishing up, they have to talk to Frederick and Christian,
Okay.
and they're gonna come in probably within a week to 10 days and start training.
And just for the board's information, we started today the training on the new telephone systems, right, Sandra? And that went, I think, quite well for the first wave of training.
Okay.
Go ahead.
3410.407B, the NFPA dues. We didn't budget last year, so it was $55, so I put 100 in case that goes up next year. And then under 3410.410B, for the Municity tablet, it's been budgeted for 400, but it's only 200 a year for each tablet, so I reduced that by 200. And those are the only changes in the fire inspector's budget.
How many hours a week is the fire inspector working right now?
17.5.
I happened to notice the revenue, which was impressive, actually was about the same amount that's budgeted for his salary. So that always makes me wonder if we should explore additional hours, or if we should explore or have that conversation.
We're going to have that conversation related to that in executive session.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Sarah and Barbara can join us at that time.
Thank you.
So I'm up to the lines 3620 for code enforcement. So I'll be sending an email this week to the board and to Frederick to transfer some money from a vacant line to cover some of the COVID overtime for some of the personnel. I don't know if you want me to do that now. I mean,
No,
the money will
that's
just be
okay,
moved
yeah.
around. The money's
We'll
there
move it around.
in the vacant line. So then the only change so far is 3620.409B under the software annual service. It went from 3,300 to 4,800, which is part of the contract, so it's an increase of $1,500. And that's the only change in the code enforcement budget.
You're just jumping around a little bit. Equipment-wise, cars are all in good operational shape,
They
you
are.
know,
They
and
get
everything's,
inspected
because they're
every year.
relatively new when they are inspected regularly. And
So they're inspected regularly, and the maintenance is still covered by warranty. I think
Is-
Susan's car had something with brakes that were outside.
Does the
of
highway department maintain them, or we take it to the station?
We haven't taken them there because we're under warranty.
Right.
But we did have a discussion, and
Right.
shortly, I'm gonna have all 4 cars brought up there one at a time.
Correct.
Just for an overall check,
Yeah.
so that you can maybe put them in some sort of a line from the one that's used the most or with the highest mileage. If in some sort of a program you were going to replace them, you can figure out which one at what
Yeah,
time.
we discussed, with Barbara, as we have with others, looking at our equipment, figuring out useful life and not going to beyond useful life, for the cars, for replacement. So I think with Mike's team on board, his, maintenance mechanics, then we should be able to get it down to a system, a process.
Just a question, is, on 3620.109B, that's 3620.109B, the intent with that particular title and salary, it looks like that was not incorporated into 2021?
It was moved.
Okay. Where,
When I was appointed to that, it's now
Yeah.
under my line.
where do you?
Under zoning, we'll get to that.
Okay, so we're coming up on that. Okay, all right. I didn't know if it should be coded as a 3620, though, since you've broadened your responsibilities. Maybe that's something we could just deal with Frederick. She,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
I don't,
So 3620 is code enforcement.
Right.
I believe she is still under zoning.
yeah, I don't
What's
think it
what lines are-
necessarily matters,
Okay,
because we're not talking about different, it's
It's
all
B
out of
fund.
B fund,
yeah.
so. I don't-
What are the zoning numbers?
So the zoning numbers are the 8015.
8015?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the last line on it.
Just one other question for you, 3620-201B. The equipment, you had roughly 6,900, I think that says. Can't see, it's too small, but,
Which one? 3201?
yeah, so you had that in this year. So we don't need any kind of upgrades next year at all? This is
No.
just a one-time
But
kind
the
of?
last payment hasn't been made, so it's showing, the money is still there, so you might want to move that into the new year. The final payment isn't due until we're up and running, and we're going into November. I mean, it might be extended to this year, but
Right.
just in case.
Yeah.
How much do you have left over, do you know?
We made 2 payments in the 6,600 range. I think the third payment is due once they start training us, and then there's a small balance that's due. I'm not sure off the top of my head, maybe 30 days after it's up.
So is this something we encumber, so we make sure we include it for this year?
It's in this year. It was an emergency fund transfer.
Right, but if you have more money that we owe, say for, pick a number, it's $2,000, I don't know what it is, but do you want to make sure it gets encumbered this year versus rolling into next year's budget?
I don't know how much, this one's only showing
Okay.
one payment, and I believe 2 payments have been made.
Okay.
So we want to make sure, though, Al, that we don't get caught flat, where the money, it's like Steve's Doors, right?
That's
You know?
exactly
That's
where I'm
what we
going
want
with
to
it.
So maybe
avoid.
5, I don't think you'll need it, but say 5,000, because we will be making the third payment shortly.
Okay.
That's more than we need, but without having the contract in front of me.
Okay.
Frederick, make sure we flag that, just keep an eye on that.
If you can just touch base with Frederick later with
Yeah.
the exact amount when you get it, just make sure
Tomorrow
we.
morning,
Yeah,
I'll
it's-
sit with him.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're on to 8010, which is the zoning board of appeals. So on line 8010.101B, there's an error there, and me and Frederick will work on that tomorrow. It shows that we've already spent $9,719 on the members. And that's an inaccurate number, it's much lower. So I still believe the 9,000 that we budgeted is more than enough for 2021. And that's the only change to that department.
Okay.
Okay, now we're on to 8015.100, which is zoning. So The changes here are no longer is there a budgeted amount under zoning administrator, but you do have a deputy zoning administrator. And I'd like to add to that $4,960 for next year. This is for COVID. This year, Judith Subbreeze, the deputy zoning administrator, has stayed for planning and zoning board meetings to man the door and to also be in here to wipe down the mics and make sure that everybody stays within the COVID outlines. So I looked at planning and I looked at zoning, how many meetings and approximately how many hours times her salary. Keep in mind, we never use it all because this year alone, we canceled like 5 zoning board of appeals meetings in the winter due to either weather or lack of applications. But on the thought that they all take place, that number has to be there.
So you're talking about the comp line, or what are you talking about?
It would have
Are you talking
to,
about creating a new line?
it would have to be a comp line for her.
Okay.
So wouldn't that fall under the 199B line, though? Could we just add?
That's what Frederick said, we could add it there.
Yeah. So how much are you looking to add to that?
$4,960.
Okay. Now, is the deputy zoning administrator, is that Judith?
Yes, it is.
So is she a collective bargaining employee or not?
Yes.
Yes,
She is,
she
okay.
is.
So I'm not familiar with the union contract here. Is there an option for, to take time or cash, or how does that work?
I'm not a union
Do we know offhand?
member.
Is there an option to take, as a union employee, is there an option presented where they can take cash or comp time?
They can either accrue it up to 75 hours, and that's the max.
Okay.
Or they can get paid out.
Okay, so, my question, you know, some individuals prefer to take time off if they need to, right? Rather than the cash money, so at the most it would be $4,960 based on
Right.
your calculation.
And that's based on the COVID
And I fully
requirements
support.
going through the entire next year.
I was here for that planning board meeting, and Judith did an excellent job. The one where we had a large attendance, keeping everyone distanced, and somehow you guys pulled off setting up screens out in the hallways, and so we need that right now.
Right.
So I have no objection to that, and we'll put that in as a formal addition when we go through the process.
Okay. The next line, there's an adjustment, 8015.401B. It's for the gas. And this year it was budgeted for 300, and I'm asking to increase it to 500. Judith goes out almost daily in the car, so between the two of us, there will be an increase in the gas.
Now, let me ask you this, that Impala that's been sitting out there, it's gotta be like an '05.
That's the blue one?
Yeah,
That's the supervisors, which
that was Joe
supervisor never
Ruggiero's.
used.
Yeah. Do we have, we are doing research on replacing that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, because I know at some point it's just not
Yeah,
gonna,
I
it's
think
not gonna go anywhere.
I think it's at this point.
49,000 miles
Yeah.
on it, though, that's it.
Yeah, but still, it's served us well. All right, I'll just make a note, we'll get to that, thank you.
Okay, the next line is 8015.405B. That's for cell phones. And there was a large increase that was put into this line when, due to COVID, 2 of the women in the building department, the zoning board of appeals secretary, and the deputy zoning administrator all had cell phones for a few months. So that's not a true number for next year. So we put 900, we left it just in case we do have to follow COVID protocols again and possibly.
Which I think is the
Need
wise
phones.
thing to do for probably all the departments. You know, we're still looking at a tough winter, unfortunately, but we're still trying to be a little conservative, keep business going.
The next line is 8015.406, publications. I've reduced that from 500 to 200. There was a $300 bulletin that I canceled because I can get it online for free.
There you go.
And the next one is for 8015.407B. I increased that by $50 for Judith, for the dues for NISBAC. And then I think, and the training, 8015.412B, I increased that from 1,500 to 2,000, because Judith will have to continue her training. She is now code certified, which is a real plum in our office. I just wanted to mention that Krista Verano, who's one of our clerks, is also code certified. So we have 2 new code certified
Wow. Great.
people. And they were amazing. They're very bright.
Make sure they're taking the tests, the civil service tests, so that they have options here in the town of Wappinger.
When they give the test.
That's true.
Good point.
So now I'm up to 80/20, which is the planning. And I don't think we really had any changes there. Just one line, and that's 80/20.408B, office supplies. We had 750, and I increased it to 850. Everything just seems to be going up. She uses a lot of envelopes and ink. We've kept it pretty much the same. And other than that, unless you have questions,
You've answered all my questions.
Notice how she looked at you?
No, listen,
I always wait for you, Bill.
over the
so-
years, you've answered many. I think we're good.
Okay?
Yep,
Gave you one last shot. Oh,
Thank
nice.
you.
That's it, nice and quick.
It's all good.
thank you. Okay, Leanne, if you would, please.
Okay, my budget's pretty straightforward also. There's not a lot of changes. With regard to line 100A and 102, there's been an increase of 1%. Equipment line was reduced by $1,170. That was because last year we had to put in for the 2 new computers, and there was no change in any of the office expense items. Everything stayed the same. I do have some numbers for you, not pertaining to expenses. Just for your review. There are numbers that are distributed throughout the budget in different
Give me one,
places.
give one to Dick. Oh, okay.
But these kind of just put everything in one spot for you to take a look at.
Thank you, Jim.
Other than that, irrespective of the COVID, we couldn't have had better timing getting everything up online this year. If for any other reason, even if people chose not to pay online, at least they could access their utility bill now. The new software program is working out very well. It has a lot of capabilities that the previous program didn't have in regard to generating reports. Working with Frederick, we're still working on the conservation pricing
Right.
for the water and sewer bills, so hopefully we'll have that in place by the next billing. And there's really been no issues whatsoever with either of the tax collections.
Was there any miscommunication or confusion relative to the school tax process not being town taxes?
I think our mailer was effective. I had maybe 5 complaints.
Because I know we made some changes
Yeah.
to better communicate.
No, people have been, I think that was well received, and plus, I've encountered, I'm sure others have, in the hallways, people asking and actually appreciated the full disclosure
Sure.
on our part.
Well, thank you for your hard
And
work.
also, I will mention that, again, back to our greeting desk, we've had a very good number of people that haven't had to come into the building, so they'll drop off their payments there, and then Cheryl gets it over to the appropriate windows, whatever one it may be. So now the combination of people coming into the office as well as those that just drop off information, it's up to 7,500 since the July opening,
Yes.
people that we process through.
Yeah, so we really do process quite a few
Yeah,
transactions.
a lot.
$49 million in school tax collection. That's right.
Yeah, right now, we're up to 10,245 transactions since the bills went out.
And in your office right now, just refresh my memory, in addition to you, do you have part-time staff in there? Or
I
full?
have a full-timer now, and Regina is in the office as well.
Okay, so Regina's
Two
assigned,
full-time.
another full-time employee assigned
Yes.
to your
But, you know,
office?
Regina is primarily doing the water and sewer.
Oh, okay.
area.
Yes, and she is making a lot of progress too. If you remember our last budget meeting, we had a discussion about where we were at with the meters. So
Right.
she's really been able to be very diligent in working on that. And, you know, with the help of Mike, we're really closing in on getting all of that, which is going to be important
Yeah.
too when we
Do our
want to change
change
the
of price.
pricing.
Do we have an idea of how many are still not metered yet?
Let's see.
Homes?
We have 58 old meters that are not reading, and we have 87 radio read meters that aren't reading right now. And that's out of 4,753 bills. But of those, 684 are sewer only.
Yep.
Well, it sounds like things are running smoother than in previous years at this point, so that's good.
Yes.
Great.
I
That's
think, you
good.
know, it's a combination of number of factors. Certainly Leanne's leadership, Regina's doing a good job, but it's also the computer updates, you know, the computer system, the software, and then just getting it down to kind of a business, you know, process that's working quite well. And departments communicating, you know, with each other very openly and freely. So I think the teamwork has made a big difference as well.
I agree.
Thank
Do you
you.
know if there's a plan in place to service the last call, 135 or so?
Right now, Mike is doing his best to Regina continually provides lists.
Okay,
His office will call and make appointments as they can fit it into their schedule.
perfect. Thank you.
Then he stores those meters over on the building, you know, Patty Lane.
I don't know how
right?
many are left over.
Yeah, there's, he said there's still a supply, but it is
I
going
don't,
down.
I don't know what the exact
Yeah.
count is, but.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Nope,
No.
thank
No,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much. Okay, Christian, please come up. Thank you.
Okay, I think my budget's relatively simple, too. Most of the numbers on the tentative budget are exact same as last year. Just want to bring up a few points. I did put in more money for outside consultants, which would be for appraisals that we would need for tax certiorari cases. Right now, we have the BJ's property or Alpine in court. We're getting an appraisal on that. It's supposed to be due in November. It's $9,500. What's in the budget now is $10,000. So if I ended up in a year where I needed 2 appraisals, I wouldn't have the money for it. Now, we try really hard to not have to get the appraisals. But there might be a year where we end up needing to get 2 or 3 appraisals, and that costs a lot of money.
And to be fair, there have been years where you haven't used that either.
Well, that's a plus, I think. We're really pretty good at, we have usually good legal representation, and we usually fight these things pretty hard, and we spend a long time with the other side, and, we know how to do value, but at some point in time, you're gonna have to go to court, because you can't come up with a case. So, you can't come up with a settlement, so at some point in time, you're gonna go to court. With the BJ's property, they want massive reductions in their
Yes.
assessments, and we're not in agreement with that. So it's worth it for us to go and get the appraisal. But again, if I have to do another appraisal, if I do 2 appraisals next year, I would be out of money. So again, I think I say this every year at budget time, and we usually leave it at 10,000, but there might be a point where I come back to the board and say, we gotta find money somewhere else, because this is the case that's going on. But normally, these end up on a rolling basis, and we can stretch them out enough that we don't have to do multiple appraisals, but I can't guarantee that forever. So,
Do you anticipate any other big properties like BJ's coming forward for any kind of issues next year? I mean, I don't know if
well,
you can-
that's probably gonna be a big issue, is that with the coronavirus, if you look at certain properties, like, if you see the McDonald's, people are wrapped around the building, I think they're doing okay. If you go to a lot of strip malls and other places, they're half empty. They've got stores that have left, they don't have, if you look at New Hackensack Plaza, they've got more vacancies than they've got tenants right now, and they've already come in and complained about their assessment. And the issue's gonna be, how are we gonna deal with those properties? I mean, we don't have any hotels here, but in Fishkill, I've got tons of hotels, and they're down to an occupancy level of 15, 20%, where normally they're at 75, 82, 88% occupied. So they're looking at massive drops in their income. I'm assuming they're coming with their lawyers next year, in force. So we don't know what we're gonna do about that.
Yeah,
So-
my experience with these types of economic situations is the municipality generally takes the hit a year later. So, you know, I look at Wappinger Plaza, for example, and it's like every week another store leaving. Thank God we have the anchors in place, hopefully they stay, right? But look at the Galleria, right? J.C. Penney. I mean, you're talking, you know, it's in the town of Poughkeepsie, but that, you know, could be a reflection of what's occurring. So I think we need to hold on tight. I appreciate what you're doing with the Alpine Commons. We've talked about that. We need to be aggressive with that, because that's a
Agreed.
huge rateable. And
Right.
I think that once we get through this pandemic, which may not be until next summer, I think we need to do what we need, you know, to protect that rateable as much as we can in a fair way. So I have no problem investing in consultant services there.
Right.
Relative to your line, I do understand you want 15,000. I see 10,000 in the tentative. We'll take that under consideration when we discuss different
Yeah,
things.
Right.
I'll share some other information here with the board.
Right, another topic about a car. We don't really have a car for my office. We use the blue car
Yeah.
that you brought up before.
Yes.
Now my office is pretty much taken, we pay for all the gas, we pay for the repairs, they'll all come out of my line, because we're pretty much the primary user of that car, though.
Okay.
Other people use the car to go to the bank, or if we need an extra car.
But he is
So, I mean, this is probably not the year for it, but at some point in time, I would like to
Well, I
get,
think that's why we're looking at it, because there is a lot more mileage, and, you know, I think particularly with Tom, you know, doing a lot of the work, you know, we've had a good meeting internally, also coordinating with Barbara and her area, so I think, in order to continue with some of those developments, that car is gonna need to be used, and certainly I don't see it as a need for the supervisor, since I use my own car and don't take reimbursement, so we can discuss that future as to when we come up with a recommendation for the car.
Right, I'm putting that on my list of capital expenses.
I agree.
mean, I think it's something that, as part of this discussion overall,
Right.
I think it is something that we need to make sure we have an operating fleet vehicle here.
Right.
So
Agree.
I'll support that.
Well, that's part of what we asked for before, a 3 to 5 year capital plan, so we can, you know, try to anticipate what kind of expenses we're gonna have in the near-term future.
Right.
So, again, this is something I agree Bill would put on a list, as well as the, you know, the highway trucks and a few other things as well.
I think as we're looking at all of our rolling stock, you know,
Yep.
as you and I have discussed as well as the board, we need to get that master plan that looks at useful life and moving it. You know, Steve's mentioned before that when he goes out and auctions equipment, if he was doing it on a better plan basis, we could probably be getting back what we get, you know, from, you know, when we buy it, you know, on the fleet basis. So I think there is a lot of cost savings there and greater efficiency.
Now, doesn't the cap agreement with Fishkill, when we pay the cost of the car and get reimbursed, is that how it works?
right, the town of Fishkill owns a car, and then we reimburse on mileage,
Okay,
right? But again, that's for my use.
That's
Tom-
for his use,
Right.
not Tom Barr's.
Tom, we're lucky we have Tom. Tom's really a hard
Gotcha.
charger.
okay.
He spent a lot of time in the field
Right.
going out and collecting,
Yeah, that's
you know,
what
tons
I
of data
think.
for us that's,
Okay.
it's like gold to us, so. But he's really good at going out and getting the
Right.
pictures, getting the sketches, doing the measuring. He's
Right.
really,
We'll make sure he has the right tools,
So-
we'll discuss it.
And I think, Jim, you know, we talked with the board again in executive session about a couple other aspects of the cap agreement too.
Okay,
Okay?
and one other thing
And not relating to Christian, you know,
No.
it's other aspects.
So I did put in for a little more money for the bar, because they did bring it up to me during the grievance board hearings,
Right.
saying that, you know, we get $200 a year, or $250, I forget what the number is.
250.
And it's been the same for the last 25 years or something, so they were, you know, and I do have a couple members who've been on the board a long time, so they were saying, you know, is it ever possible to get a few more dollars? So I
Well,
would
we can
ask.
consider that.
you
I
know.
think we need to
So-
get, you know, we haven't looked at that for a while, so.
Right, I think I put in $300 a board member instead of $250, so it's,
who's,
you know.
are all the spots filled? 'Cause
Well, I have one person who's just resigned, and then one person's term is up is Bruce Flowers. But I don't think he's gonna get back on the grievance board, he's already serving
No,
on
yeah,
the other
we've
board.
Talked about.
Right.
that.
So that's what, your term expires September 30th, is it?
I believe so, so we
Yeah.
gotta get somebody in
So we have two
before
openings.
the grievance
Yeah,
in
we
May,
have two, that's
so.
right.
The issue is usually trying to find people interested, it's not the most glamorous board out there, and usually try to find somebody who understands real estate
Right.
and how to value it a little bit, so, it's not a huge pool of people, so it's still usually difficult to find someone.
Well, when we went
So-
through our previous candidates, you know, for several different boards, I think there's one or two on that list that
Yeah.
also
Expressed
expressed interest,
interest.
so I think we
Yeah.
can go back to that too.
I agree. See
Right.
if they're still interested.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think
that would
the-
be great, so.
I think the plan was Bruce was gonna finish his term out, and
Right.
then he'd focus on planning board,
Yep.
so
Right.
that'll be an opening.
Yeah.
Right, his term is up, and
Yeah.
then, so. And then Lisa Molotores has recently resigned.
Right,
So,
right.
she'd been on the board for years, so, but I think she just had enough. But again, you do it for a long time, she served her time, so I can't fault her for wanting off. So,
What are, you know, just, yeah, here not to put you on the spot, but what are you thinking for this coming year with reval and so forth, in
Well-
light of the pandemic and which?
well, we're in a strange situation in where the residential properties are soaring in value, and the commercial properties are not. So I have to look at both. I can't really apply a similar trend, because commercial properties are just out of control right now. Like, you know, if I have a house assessed for $275,000, it's usually selling for $325 or $350 or more, and it's on the market for 4 or 5 days, and it's in contract. It's really kind of crazy right now. So I had a conference call with the state about our levels, and they have to analyze our rolls and see that we're at 100% of value. We are planning to do a reval next year, at least I am, planning to do a reval next year. All the other towns are as well, especially the ones that we paused this year and didn't do a reval. The term he used was heavy lifting. The towns have a lot of heavy lifting to do to say, hey, you can't just raise values 1 or 2% and expect to be at 100% of value. Because what we're seeing as far as the market is up. And it was up even before coronavirus, but it seems like it's now accelerated dramatically, so.
But isn't that uptick kind of an artificial one that we saw also in 2008, 2009? My biggest concern, Christian, is that, you know, the state is going to attempt to try to get 100% of inflated value, you know, and at the same time saying there's going to be no tax increase, but the next net effect, of course, is significant payment at a time when there's artificial, perhaps,
Right.
pandemic buying. So I think as we're looking at our budget, you know, and how we look at taxes and so forth, we are, as a board, concerned about that, so that too much is not passed off also to our, you know, poor residents.
Right. Well, I try to be
Right.
you know, sharpen my pencil as much as possible and be as conservative as possible, trying to get to the 100% of value.
Right.
But again, you know, when we revalued in 2007, that was at the height of the last real estate boom, and then market values went down. So we revalued that number, and then I was never shy about reducing assessments in some years dramatically to get people down to saying this is what the market's doing.
Right.
So now the market's back on the upswing again, we need to follow that. And if it crests and goes back down again, we're gonna follow it back down again. So, you know, the inflated market unfortunately is the market right now. So there's really no properties that have not increased in value. So we'll have to, I mean, I haven't run all my numbers yet. The roll doesn't come out until May 1st, so there's a lot of work to do between now and then.
And that's a July 1st, 2020
July 1st,
valuation.
2020, right. So again, the market since July 1st, the market's accelerated probably even faster. So we're not necessarily going to catch all of that now, but that just sets us up for 2022, showing even more of an increase. So,
Ultimately, it's based on levy, though, so we are, you know, unlike other entities, we keep our eye on the ball with levy. That's what we do, okay? As assessments go up, tax rates, okay, will adjust based on levy, so it's all relative. It's scary when we hear people talk about doing revals and increasing assessments, because people automatically associate that with having to pay more taxes, but what we've done in this town is kept our levy as stable as possible, and that tax rate will go down and adjust accordingly, so.
Which is exactly what I tried to do in the tentative, you know. to
Well,
keep
you
it-
did, you did a good job.
Year to
You did a
year,
great
so it's
job.
a great
if we were to see a huge spike in the assessed value of the town, then you might see a corresponding decrease in the tax rate.
Well, you
If-
should.
As long as if you're budgeting.
There are some entities that ride the wave, and I see them doing it, and that's taking advantage
Well,
of
that's very good,
overtaxing.
right.
Right.
Can't do that.
The school district and the county are our
I'm
biggest tax
not,
collectors.
I'm not naming any
Okay,
entities.
well, I name them every day, so it's true.
I mean, say what you want about the school district's at $17 per thousand. If you go north of here into other school districts, you're at $24, $25 per thousand. So we have been fortunate that the school district's been able to keep that tax rate much lower than others, so.
Yep.
We try to do the same.
Which is the reason also why, we have no inventory of houses, because people are coming in here for that tax rate as well. It's good.
That is true.
And good school district.
Right, if you look at Arlington,
Yeah.
a much more expensive district, their values are not going up as much, and they started from a lower number because the high taxes keep people from paying large amounts of money for those properties.
And to be
So-
fair, there are other tax collecting entities within those areas that we don't have to deal with, which I'm not gonna get into
Yep.
specifically,
Great.
but, some additional $7 and $8 per thousand in some services that we don't have to,
Yeah.
Thankfully, yes.
Right.
Those are astronomical numbers that people have to pay. So, my other thought was, and I wanted to bring up my, I'm kind of in a unique situation with my salary, and that this town board and the Fishkill Town Board have to be in agreement over to what I get paid for each year. That's based on the cap agreement that we have. The issue I'm finding, and I've been having over the years, is there's lots of times when the towns give raises out to everybody, but I'm excluded from that multiple times. Over the last 6 or 7 years, there's been multiple occasions where the town says we're gonna do a 2 or 3% raise for everybody except you. And that's happened to me multiple times. And again, I don't think it's anyone's fault here, but it has been the fault of prior administrations here and prior administrations in Fishkill who were not necessarily, didn't follow through with their promises, or, said things that they didn't follow through on. So normally the supervisors have a discussion and they try to come up with a number and then bring it back to the board. So I have spoke with the Fishkill supervisor, and he's interested in discussing it more with our supervisor and see if they can come up with some type of number. But again, in 2020, I didn't get a raise because of a problem that Fishkill had. And then years before that, in 2017, I didn't get a raise because of a problem we had here in Wappingers. And then we used to get our health insurance for free, but then they came up and said, okay, we're gonna have employees start paying for their health insurance. But the year we did that, they said, but it's okay, because everyone's gonna get a raise to help pay for that increase. But I was excluded from that raise again, so I keep seeing health insurance costs going up, and then I don't get a raise, so then my salary actually goes down, that what I take home. So it's just something to think about, because I would like to,
So, you don't have to say anymore. I have no objection to the supervisors of both towns developing a methodology that's multi-year and bring that back to each respective town board so we can discuss. So it's fair and equitable.
And, I agree with that.
right, well, Fishkill tried to do that a year or two ago, but then they scrapped it,
Yeah.
so.
Well, we've also,
were.
again, there have been administration changes in both towns.
Mhm.
I think right now, Ozzy and Dick can have a little bit of stability and have a conversation. We also have, now we have a professional HR specialist that can assist with this process
Right.
also. So I have no objection to the supervisors taking that initiative and bringing something back to the boards.
Okay.
Good.
Well, I'll see Ozzy tomorrow, and then hopefully they can
Oh,
get
and I'll
together
talk
and make
with him,
something
yeah.
happen, so,
Thank you.
and that's about it for me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next one is our animal control. I had invited him to come. He didn't show up, right?
There might be a dog on the loose.
Maybe dog on the loose, perhaps. Who knows? But I think, Frederick, there's no change, right, in anything that he's done as far as the budget goes, correct? No change at all, nothing with respect to, well, his van was new last year, so that shouldn't be anything. I think Joe, what was the amount for the dog?
Violation?
Yeah, 0, right? Yeah, I'm gonna talk with him, because we do have some cases out here that we get resident complaints about, but other than that, I think he's been doing a good job.
For the record, anytime I've called Jerry, he's been out there.
He's been out there, no.
Every time I've
Yeah.
called him, he's out there, so. Sometimes we don't see the value on paper, but I know for a
He
fact.
comes in regularly, and we talk with him, and he's, had some, significant challenges that he's dealt with actually very effectively. He has taken some, before COVID, to the board, and protecting, like at Carnwath and so forth. So, I've seen him doing a good job on all those fronts. So I don't have an issue, but I did invite him, but
Now, he's relatively flat if you looked at the amended budget for 2020 versus what he's asking for. It's just another couple $100, so it's
Yeah.
close.
I guess the only question I have is regarding, what's the line on the dog?
3510.1,
Yeah.
A.
So,
Okay, so, no, the dog housing agreement.
we finished that, right? We signed off on that.
Yeah, no, I didn't, because I don't think we've had many, we basically get charged by the animal, right?
Right,
It's
so
not a-
3510.405A is what it previously came out of.
You know, the
Yeah,
actual,
Kennel rent?
Yeah,
I mean, there's nothing really there.
yeah.
yeah, no, I just, you know,
In
it's.
previous years, though, that has not been the case. I mean,
It really, it's kind of goes with the number of because that's where the violations are.
yeah.
You know, it's a dog that gets, you know, a dangerous dog that gets picked up and.
And one of the good things that, one of several, clearly that Jerry's been doing is that we've had, before COVID, clinics, and, they've embedded the sensor, the tracker, and so forth, and so that has brought about more registrations and being able to track the dogs and the ownership, so that's been quite helpful.
Well, to the extent you can track the owner, there's less kennel fees if you can,
Yeah,
contact the owner.
that's right, so he's been able to do that and place, dogs with the families, much more easily. Okay, so, nothing else, right, Frederick, on that line, okay. So the next item is supervisor and town board. We've had some small increases with respect to our cost, administration, postage, copier. I've asked Sandra to just explain to you, go over some of the things we've been doing in this area. Well, Sandra's been doing, she's the one that's done the heavy lifting. I'm just along for the ride.
It's been a hectic year. So with the COVID, PPE supplies and everything that we've had to do to prepare for the opening, we've certainly incurred a lot of costs that we've had to, originally we were putting them in the supervisor line, then we moved them out of the supervisor line, so things did get a little bit mixed up just trying to stay in budget. Just starting from the supervisor line, there's no changes. The confidential secretary to the supervisor reflects the possible 1.25 increase.
And again, that's gonna be in line with whatever we negotiate with the union on the CBA.
Sure.
Which will be all our staff, basically, non-elected staff.
Deputy supervisor remains the same. I'm looking to add a secretary comp line, and that is only to be used when I'm called out to this building for fire alarms or burglar alarms, and I have to actually get out of bed and come here in the middle of the night to meet the police.
Which has
Or
happened.
on a weekend, which has happened.
Too often than I'd like to see,
Yes,
as
I
far
think
as.
the last time it happened, I told the supervisor, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to pay for this at 3 a.m. So I'm asking to add a small item of.
But also to that point, Sandra's been working with our security company to get them more disciplined and to get more
Yes.
testing and training done, which they are, I think, starting to do a little bit better job on, but she's had to beat them over the head.
Yes, I'm pretty tough. Supervisor's equipment line, which is the next line down, is actually coming out with a surplus. I think there were items that we purchased in the regular supply line that could have come out of that line, but we're gonna phase out that line because there's nothing really, there's supervisor's equipment. If we have to buy small items, they're just really coming out of supplies. Miscellaneous and training, we're looking to have that at 2,500. It's actually less because I believe that the Association of Towns is going to be virtual this year, so there won't be any hotel costs. I think we're going to be seeing a decrease in the hotel costs. We do still have to pay our membership, we still have to pay the, each person that's going to take classes has to pay their fee, so there are still fees associated. Gas and repairs, we're going to remove that because the supervisor doesn't use a vehicle. The telephone. The telephone line, Frederick has been posting the telephone line to a different line where he's putting all the phones, but we're going to make sure that it reflects on this for the new year. So we are asking for the telephone line to be left in there at $1,200. And that does include the supervisor's phone and my phone. I use my phone all the time. People text me all the time. Highway employees, I'm constantly getting texts. And also when there's snowstorms, I contact the staff and let them know. Other than the Facebook and the website, sometimes they'll text me at 6 and ask if we're opening or not. Postage is gonna stay the same. The office supplies, I'd like to budget $2,500. We're the catch-all for town hall. The supervisor's office is the catch-all for all those little incidentals that nobody thought to order. I order boxes of batteries so we can keep all the clocks in the building running, and I order the lights on the outside of the offices that you see. So when somebody's leaving at the end of the day, you know that they're still in the building. But these are all incidentals that really don't have a place to be budgeted. So I'd like that line to be at $2,500.
So you have 2250 now, you want to make that 2500?
Correct.
And I add one other thing, when it comes to a number of purchases that are done by other departments in the town, when they go into an organization, Sandra has not been able to figure out to who they are, purchased
Yeah, that's
by,
when we
right? Why
order
don't
from
you explain
Dutchess
that?
County. So when we place an order at Dutchess County, right, because I like to use them, they're really a great cost. Their cost is minimal compared to others. What happens is there's numerous employees in this building that order through Dutchess County. And I called Dutchess County storeroom and I asked them, can you tell me who's ordering the supplies? And is there any way that we can put a line on that order to say what department ordered these supplies? So somebody orders, 5 boxes of envelopes. They show up in this building, somebody gains ownership of them. I have no idea who they went to. All of a sudden we get a bill in a county and I sit there for, a long time trying to figure out who ordered the supplies. They have no way of noting on there.
So we absorb that.
So we absorbed. Today I absorbed $20 for a box of envelopes, printing or something, because we don't know who it belongs to. So that happens all the time. We tend to be the catch-all for everything. We're also the catch-all for flowers, for, we want to send out flowers. That's a catch-all for that,
So I was going to say, with respect to that, since we seem unfortunately, very regrettably, to be having more, perhaps we add, several $100s, in here for some of those things, because as the board knows, and I mentioned to you each time, we either send out note or a gift card, or the gift cards we've been covering out of our own personal pockets, but the flowers, like, for recent
Right,
funerals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, how much would be good just for a small amount, you think?
For just funerals or just in general?
Yeah.
I'm going to just give an example. We were doing Employee of the Month. The supervisor was paying out of his pocket every month for flowers or something to award to the employee. So I think there's a line that is allowed that's called celebrations with accounting. I think we need to think about putting a line for celebrations. We don't really celebrate anything here, and when we do, the staff brings their own food. So I think it would be appropriate to, yes, add a line certainly for flowers, and we can add a few dollars to the supervisor's line, maybe $300 or $400, because flower arrangements, I don't know if you know, but they're like $150 if you want it to look halfway decent. So they're not inexpensive at all. But also, and along with that, is celebrations. How do we reward the good? And that's what I really would like to all of you to think about.
I think on certain occasions, I certainly had no problem, and I know the councilmen have been very giving, and doing some of that out of our own pocket.
Oh, yes,
But I
absolutely.
think
Yes,
certain
yes.
expenses
Well,
may be appropriate.
yeah,
So
like
contingency.
for last year's holiday decorations, all our vendors, amazing, right? All our friends donated. CPL and Wallace and Wallace and many others donated something that
Pamela.
I could award for the best decorated office, and that was great. And we'll probably do it again this year, but we should be able to at least pay for
And it goes up next
It's
year.
live. We
Hear
should,
that, Betsy?
yeah, hear that, Betsy. We should at least be able to, buy, a 6-foot wedge or two, or something like that. We don't seem to have anywhere to get that money. So I would ask that we add celebrations in there for the whole building to use as a line for the supervisor's office. I don't know, maybe $1,000 or something like that. That's something, if you could consider that, that would be great.
I have no objection to that. I remember some discussions, Jim, in the past about what we're allowed to spend money on and what we're not allowed to spend money on.
So, celebrations, you can have like employee incentive programs, employee recognition programs. Those are permissible expenses. Right now, I'm looking at the New York State Controller's Office Chart of Accounts to see if they have a specific title, but generally, things to recognize employee performance or things like that.
Employee of the month?
They're permissible expenses.
So then we can work with Jim in the definition to make sure we have the right boundaries on that.
So-
Yeah, the employee incentive, I don't have any sort of reservation about. I just think that we gotta be
Right.
careful with funeral and flowers. I remember having
Okay.
discussions about this in previous years. There's some category, or definition that needs to be defined, and we're not gonna do it right here, right now, but
Okay.
before we create a line, let's make sure
Agreed.
that, we're doing it right, that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Jim, you can look in.
So the copier lease is a little bit higher than it was in the past because I replaced my copier where I would have to buy toner to a leased copier. So with a leased copier, black and white copies, you can make up to 5,000 copies and you're not paying for any of that toner. So it really works out. Toner is really expensive. So we're testing this out and see how it goes. If I feel like it doesn't work out, we might get rid of it in the future. But that's one way of cutting down. As we get new leases also, we're looking to reduce cost and make sure that the copier is appropriate for the use.
So you spent roughly $1,390 this year, you only have $1,500 next year. You think that's enough to cover you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Grant writing, I believe the supervisor is leaving as is.
Yeah.
Mileage,
And
again.
Scott's still doing a good job, very good job, right, Timmy? I mean, we work with him regularly on that, so he hasn't asked anything more.
Mileage we have not used in the past. The supervisor does not use mileage normally, but I would like to leave it in the line, just in case one day I can get him to fill out a form and hand it in. We might have mileage. Probably not.
I would say, for this year,
Yeah.
since we're trying to, cut or, make it more realistic, I would say we can eliminate it. If there was a special occasion that we needed to consider that, whether it's legal liability or what have you, we can come to the board at that time.
I had no problem.
Yeah,
Okay, then we can take mileage out.
yeah, take that out for now.
Also, the supervisor spoke about the vehicle. It is a 2009 vehicle. It is something that you need to start thinking about. The vehicle is used by by Regina, who goes to the bank, by the girls in the accounting office, the accounting clerks go to the bank, and certainly Tom has first priorities. He usually takes it in the morning to do his job as the data clerk.
And
And
Joey
that's-
uses it once in a
and
while
Joey
too, with my
uses it, yes.
permission, on certain
Yep.
town business.
Yeah.
So it is used. I mean, there's no question about
Oh,
it.
yeah.
We are using
Yeah.
it regularly.
You should definitely have at least one working vehicle that everybody has access to. And everybody that has access to the
But the thing that
vehicle.
Sandra's been, making sure to do is to control the use of the key and make sure that it's, properly monitored, so we have strict accountability on who
Yes,
uses the car.
we've come to the conclusion, of course, the data clerk gets it in the morning first, and the banking stuff is done in the afternoon. It all works out really well, and Joey knows he checks in just to make sure that nobody's using the vehicle. And I think that's all I got.
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for any one of us? We're our audience here, which is largely our employees, before we close this section. Jim, process going forward, okay? We've reviewed this, we've gotten all the preliminary inputs based on the tentative budget. We have to have the next meeting, have to have a public, quote-unquote, public meeting.
So there is a
how do we do
resolution
it?
on this evening's agenda to adopt the preliminary budget based on the changes that were discussed, Frederick can incorporate those changes. You don't have to do it right now, but.
Yeah. And we're going to want to have executive session, talk about a couple of things too.
So, but with respect to that, so there is a resolution on the agenda. The only thing that I ask you, which is an important thing on that resolution, the notice of the public hearing has to set forth the salaries of the elected officials, and they are listed there in your packet. I just, before they go out, I just want to check that they are in fact correct. Supervisor is 61,000, highway superintendent 83,661, town justices are 31,465, town clerk is 60,634, and the council members are 11,883.
So there's no change from previous years?
Right.
And I think for the record, obviously, I don't think we are interested in even exploring that at this point as a result of this fiscal uncertainty we face, correct?
Yes, and that's, was my recommendation in the budget.
Just for the board and public's knowledge, should any of these office salaries change, should the board wish to change any of these salaries next year, they are subject to a permissive referendum. So it's not a process where you can just increase your salary. So New York town law requires a pretty formal process to adopt the salaries of the elected officials.
So again, as an elected official, I think I can speak on behalf of my fellow elected officials. Based on the unprecedented time that we face right now and fiscal uncertainty, we're not even going to explore making any changes to elected salaries. Is that correct?
That's correct. Whereas some other municipalities have been considering that, but we should not.
We're not in a position to do that. However, that said, we do understand that we have full-time employees that work here.
Correct.
Many of them are under a union contract, which I think one of them is being negotiated right now.
Actually, both, one is being negotiated for this year and next year, and we have another one, with respect to the highway department for next year. So we are negotiating both.
So we are, in those respects, I think it's fair to say, entertaining what is fair and feasible from a town perspective. Also, our management employees that are in the budget here, I think there is some discussion that needs to be had relative to making sure that their salaries are fair and equitable. So I don't want to imply that there will be no increases. I'm just stating that the elected officials will not be taking any, entertaining anything additional at this time.
Correct. Yep.
Correct?
Mm-hmm. Agreed, fully.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
That's mine too.
Relative to the preliminary budget adoption, I know we've made a number of changes. I've taken a lot of notes here. I want to be in a position where I can have conversations with the supervisor and my colleagues about some of these things, and I'm sure that there's some things they want to discuss, one-on-one, and then bring back some proposals for formal adoption. When do we have to have the preliminary budget adopted by?
So, again, the preliminary budget basically doesn't, it's still subject to change, the preliminary budget. So there is an error, which I did not catch until now. The next date, so the statute requires that the public hearing shall be held no later than the Thursday, on or before the Thursday immediately following the general election.
So the
which would
5th?
be the 5th.
We had discussed that before, didn't we?
Yeah,
We had a resolution or something
And I think
on
we
that?
had it as the 5th,
All right.
but, so the public hearing should be on November 5th. So with respect to some, budget, if you want to hold another public hearing and formally adopt a preliminary budget, based on the changes, which I think now are relatively minimal, and I don't think there's really been any particular contention regarding the items listed in the budget,
I think that.
I think you can adopt the preliminary budget at this point in time, and again, for purposes of, you know, you can iterate until you get to the final budget. So, basically, the way the process works is the first budget that's proposed, the tentative budget is the town supervisors. If the board does not vote to make any changes before the public hearing, then the tentative budget becomes the preliminary budget for purposes of the public hearing. And then after that point in time, you have until November 20th to adopt the final budget.
And we can then make changes. right,
Yes, up
with or
until
without
prior
public-
to that time. So,
Yeah.
so right now, if you do not adopt the changes that you've discussed, and you don't hold another town board meeting before November 5th, then the then the tentative budget is for legal purposes, the tentative budget becomes the preliminary budget. It sounds
Now,
very complicated.
on the
but-
5th, we would have the public hearing.
Correct.
Then there can be a town board meeting to further discuss that night as well, or?
You can have it that night, you can
Yeah,
have
some
it
other
every
time.
night
I'm
until
just
the
trying to
20th.
figure out the process.
It has to be before election.
What's that?
It has to be before election.
No, it has to be the Thursday, it has to be no later than the Thursday before election.
Right, the preliminary, but you're talking about the salaries.
Before or after?
Right?
No, I'm talking about the adoption of the preliminary budget, it has to be done before election.
Well, for all intents and purposes, because it has to be published.
Right.
So if the board does not adopt a preliminary budget at this time, the tentative budget becomes a preliminary budget. Right.
But then what,
We don't
okay,
meet in November.
I'm confused now. With respect to the public hearing, you said that's the Thursday after Election Day?
Yes.
Okay.
So either way, you still gotta have a meeting on November 5th.
Fifth,
Correct.
Correct.
So, but so just to be clear, so we have between now and November 5th to make changes that the public will review. So if we, for example, we're talking about, you know, we've made some changes tonight, and I have a couple that I want to bring forward to the rest of the board as well, but assuming that all gets done by the 5th, we can potentially vote on that, and that could be final, or we have
Well, you
after
have to have
November
another
5th.
meeting.
Or you can have a meeting after November 5th, up to the 20th.
Right.
Could
To make changes.
we adopt a preliminary budget on November 5th?
No.
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 It's got to be published ahead of time.
So,
So what's the purpose of the public?
right,
hearing
that's
on
a good
November
point.
5th?
what's the point of the public hearing on the 5th?
Again, you can't, so you have to have, it's to review the budget.
So it's just to set-
Review the preliminary budget. So
You
if,
can do that on the night, you don't need to do that on the 5th.
no, there has to be a public hearing
On what?
on the budget.
On what budget, preliminary or tentative?
What, if you do not make any changes, if you do not adopt a resolution to make any changes to the tentative budget, then the tentative budget becomes the public hearing, becomes the preliminary budget for purposes of the public hearing on November 5th.
Or we can just adopt tonight the preliminary budget.
And again, just because you adopt a preliminary budget, you can certainly change it again.
Right, so then we still have till November 20th to make changes.
Correct.
Right.
So if there was a board that did not agree with the supervisor's budget, that's where this whole thing would come into play.
Correct.
I have no objection to the overall global budget right now.
I don't either. I'm good with the
So-
overall. I just want to change line
Right,
items
so we
underneath.
don't need to have this dance, really. So,
Correct.
we can adopt the preliminary budget tonight, we can have the public hearing on the 5th, we can also make some changes and recommendations that we gain consensus for. I just want to have a conversation
Correct.
before we get to
Sure.
the dais, right? I know you have some interests that you want to address, I have some interests I want to address. Together, we want to talk about capital expenses for 2021, right?
Yep.
All
Correct.
those things can be done, it's just by November 20th, we need to have the final budget adopted. We're not that far right now from the final budget. What we've discussed over the last few meetings are just, these are minor things. You're talking $250 here, $500 here, that's nothing. If you want to make additions and subtractions that are, minor expenses, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I would, tonight, not have an objection to adopting the preliminary budget, have the public hearing on November 5th. We can also, that night of the November 5th meeting, can we also entertain budget modifications?
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
so-
right.
And I mean,
No, that's
to
no
the,
issue.
to the extent the board agrees on all of the changes that be made at the November meeting, at the November 5th meeting, the board can adopt the
Right.
budget at that
Yeah.
time.
We wouldn't have to have another
Theoretically-
meeting.
Theoretically, we could adopt the final budget if we all we're at the same,
Correct.
Right.
consensus.
That's right.
So, okay, my questions are answered.
So, yes.
So I think I have a couple items a little bigger than $250, but, I mean,
No,
I'm
you know
certainly
what?
willing to sit there and negotiate and talk about it.
Listen,
Let me
I was
just-
only using it as an example. I'll entertain anything that you bring forth.
Now,
Okay.
with respect to the capital budget, to the extent you're going to bond that and pay that in out years, it's not going to appear in the 2021 budget.
Right, it'll be 2022, that's right.
Correct, but I think the reason
just-
why.
I'm not saying it's something that you shouldn't do, I'm just saying for
Right,
purposes
just
of-
so that we get an idea of debt service obligations,
Correct.
that's all.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's all,
exactly, need that.
you know. All right, so I have nothing further. I understand the process.
Okay, so let's move on to resolutions.
Okay.
That we have set up here. First one is Resolution 2020-110. Jim, is there anything outstanding on this before we call it, or do we?
No, we'll just leave that on the table.
Okay,
I was
so
gonna ask
this is again, Resolution 2020-110, resolution accepting Pasadena Court and related easements for all Angel Heights subdivision together with maintenance agreement secured by cash deposit. Do I have a motion to table?
I'll make a motion to table.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passes.
Can I just ask a question, though? I mean, we've tabled this thing now, 6 times already.
6 times, yeah.
I mean, how many
The-
more times are we gonna continue to table this?
Well,
What is the outstanding
7th.
issue, I guess, is the question.
we need a maintenance bond from the developer.
So
And we
have
don't
we
have it.
notified it and tell them that we need a maintenance bond? I mean, why?
We
why does-
have,
Yes, repeatedly.
and so he hasn't gotten back to us.
Let's
but-
don't put it on the agenda in the next 2 weeks. I said this last time. Let's put it out a month or two.
Yeah,
If they
no, we'll
can't,
put
if
it
they
on the.
can't get their
we'll-
act
We'll put
together,
it back in, we'll put it out till December, till after the budget is done.
Joe, you got
Because-
that? Okay.
Because the option that we're gonna look at is using, we have some money in escrow, or not in escrow, we have a bond, we have a cash bond. So we're looking at converting what we have in a cash bond into, and using that to purchase the maintenance bond.
And then again, are the kids gonna have to walk to the end of the road to get on the school bus?
That's basically, I
That's an
believe,
issue.
I believe.
Sure it is.
My
Big issue.
understand, I don't know if they're actually,
Not yet, but when they
They-
finally,
Yeah, you're right.
you know, I don't know.
yeah, I don't know if,
I don't know who's
the
back to
status.
school and who's not, but the point is, when they don't post these bonds and we don't accept the roads, there's a US mail issue and a bus issue that occurs.
Now, I know US Mail's making the delivery, and I don't know the status of the bus.
So
all the
this needs to be
mailboxes are on
resolved.
the end of the street, though. I mean, it's not like
Safety.
they're going
No,
in.
are they still, unless
Yeah,
that,
they're still at the end of the street. They're not going inside.
Oh.
Yeah.
So either way, it needs to be done.
Yep.
Okay.
um,
Then the next one is Resolution 2020-154, resolution adopting local law number 4, the year 2020, amending chapter 171 of the Town of Wappinger Code in Parks and Recreation by repealing the existing provisions in their entirety and adding new provisions. Jim?
so, made the amendments that were discussed previously
Thank you.
regarding, the organized baseball activities and
Jim, do you have an extra copy since I have to make the sign?
Thanks.
I'll email you.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Did you ever see this?
That's the law. So, so with respect to the changes, we had added the park, Angel Brook Park, and Sergeant Palmetier. And then I added a section regarding undeveloped recreation areas. These are areas that have been noted over the years on subdivision plats to be dedicated for park purposes. There's also an additional level of properties that have been just designated as open space, which are not included here. And the way I amended it was that all of the regulations that applied in the parks would also apply in the undeveloped areas, because they're prohibitions. They're not really, the prohibitions would apply also to the undeveloped areas. There's a number of properties that are in the town, which are just Fieldstone, the Hamlet, Kendall Farms. There's a notation here which came over from the comprehensive plan dealing with parks about a park off Briar Lane. There's actually 3 or 4 town-owned parcels there. Some of which really are just wetlands parcels. There's also some other properties that the town owns, which are really just wetlands that have been designated for protection and haven't been offered for dedication to the town. A number of these properties here have wetlands issues on them. The Blackwatch, which is the property that was off of Viola Lane that we had discussed at some length, a lot of that is wetland. Also on here, Meadowwood, which is between the Meadowwood Wells and Sprout Creek. Also associated with the Meadowwood development, the town took title to, I called it for lack of a better word, White's Corners Pond, which is just south of Old Hopewell Road at the creek. It's really just a drainage area, but it was, the deed to that property said for recreation purposes.
Its formal name is the All Angels Bog, historically.
Okay. And then Woods Edge is a subdivision also off of Robinson Lane. It would be downstream from, Woods Edge is right next to the Joan Lane Pond area. Those two are downstream from the Robinson Lane Park, and upstream from that Blackwatch property. There's a park, there's a parcel that was dedicated for park purposes back in the 1960s at the end of Riverview Drive. There's also down off of Boxwood Close, south of Dugan Lane, there's another large parcel down there that was dedicated. So these are all those properties. And as far as I could tell, the other properties, some of the other properties that were listed are just open space parcels. There's one at the corner of, I guess it's opposite Kendall Farms. It seems to be it's a wetlands parcel, and it was a well protection.
That's on the corner of Spook Hill?
Right, Spook Hill. There's 3 large parcels there. So these are all parcels that were reserved by the town in subdivision applications for recreation purposes.
So that list of recreation areas could theoretically be a fluid it could continue
Yeah.
to grow.
Correct. Like,
Um,
right now, we had the discussion regarding Wappingers Farms, but at this point in time, we just put a conservation easement on it, and the town doesn't intend to improve it until we look at coming up with what we would do with that parcel.
And we also had a potential parcel in the Regency that they had
Right.
supposedly before my time, committed to turn over to
So
the
we'll,
town.
so we'll add to this spreadsheet.
So we can add to it.
Where's
over
Wappingers
time.
Farms again? Where's that?
So
All
it's
right.
actually between Robinson Lane and this Joan
Okay, I know
Pond
what you're
area.
talking about.
Yep.
There's a parcel in, I'm probably not even allowed to say this, Indian Village, which you can't say now, right? So, what was the name of that subdivision originally?
Indian Village.
No, there was a formal name for it.
Wappinger Park.
Wappinger Park.
Yeah.
Right, so, no, because you got Wappinger Park, right?
Wappinger Park, yep.
There's a parcel in there that was at one time a well, where the water
Right,
was?
and we actually had we had a discussion
Yes.
regarding these properties.
Oh, you did?
There's
In
a
our
number of
consultant.
properties that are shown on there and,
Right.
on the map, which is actually very useful. And I commend the people who prepared it.
So that's not it's not park at this point?
Well, and it never was, and this is an
Never
issue,
was.
this is an issue that comes up
Yeah.
frequently in many municipalities, because what winds up happening is, particularly near wells,
Right.
because all wells require a well protection area, happened in the village.
Right.
The right outside the village well field was a baseball field.
Right.
And then there was requirements after 9/11 to come in and put in
Yeah.
security for
Yeah.
critical infrastructure, and
Right.
it wound up being right in the middle of the baseball field. So actually, we have the issue in Fleetwood because the recreation, the swings and things in Fleetwood are actually not on the parcel that was designated for recreation purposes. It's actually on the well parcel. So, we've got, but again, one of those things that we were looking at identifying is some of these town-owned properties that were water and sewer facilities which have been decommissioned.
Right.
Now technically are surplus properties, which the town could sell to abutting property owners, even if we sold it for a relatively nominal value, just to get rid of the liability. Because Mike Tremper has said he's received complaints, hanging trees, things of that nature, so.
Well, that Wappinger Park location, and I'm referring to the one off Cayuga, that could potentially be an actual recreation area, since it traverses through all those
Yeah.
streets.
No,
I mean,
you're
it
right.
covers from one end to the other.
And there's not really one over there.
There is no real
No,
recreation over
that
there.
was my thinking, too.
So, I'm not gonna get into this too deeply here,
Right.
but I would imagine there's some sort of an action that needs to occur to declare a decommissioned, infrastructure parcel into parkland, right?
Right.
So I wouldn't wanna do that until I find, consensus from the residents, right? Cause as we know, there's, some residents like parks and others don't.
Right.
But that would be a thought perhaps.
So certainly.
you know.
I mean, we can identify those, because I know there's one off of, in the old Oakwood Knolls water. I mean, we use the Oakwood Knolls sewer as a storage facility, but there's a parcel back there that was a wellhead. Mike Tremper is probably the best person to tell you about, the abandoned sites. The old Rockingham sewer plant has got now a cell tower. I mean, that's the other.
Well, and also, we've talked about, Al and I, about, tearing down the old water plant building
Right.
that's sitting back there. and
Yep.
there's-
Rockingham, right?
In
Yep.
Rockingham, yes.
I mean, and
All right,
that's the other
So
thing.
anyway, I think we have a good basis here with this map, and we're gonna just expand it, with CPL and Mike and others, Joey's been quite helpful, so good collective effort, so we can do that and identify for future meeting. For now, I think we stick with what we have in this chapter 171.
So, I mean, to the extent that, I think this is, a fairly comprehensive list based on what we have. And this is a combination of what was in the 2010 comprehensive plan and checked back to what's on the map. So I know there was an issue regarding something off of Thorn Acres,
Right.
which,
Thorn Acres and Wheeler Hill.
which is a creek bed that was reserved. There's a number of
That's a
properties
Oh,
throughout.
yeah, the one where the old pump house was, the old well was. Thorn Acres, no, I'm sorry, I'm talking about Tall Trees, yeah, that's.
Yeah, no, Thorn,
Yeah,
on
Thorn Acres is the
Thorn
creek
Acres,
bed.
so that was shown on here.
Yeah.
So there's a number of parcels on here that actually, have been reserved to the town during the subdivision process.
And we have other parcels, like the one along Sprout Creek that's actually in East Fishkill,
Correct.
right? As similar to our Castle Point, which is in Fishkill.
And that one is that's a wellhead protection
Yeah.
property.
Well, also on that note too, just this last week, I discovered, I brought to the supervisor's attention, the assessors, we have several properties that are not, the title is not listed as the town of Wappinger, it's still listed as the Central Wappinger Water Improvement District.
Right.
But it's owned by 20 Middle Bush Road,
Right.
and so on and so forth. There's some in East Fishkill, there's some in Wappinger, but there's a number of these properties that we discovered because the title just did not say they were owned by the town of Wappinger. So now I'm going back through all of our parcel lists and trying to look at Wappinger Park and all the old water and sewer district names to see if we missed any. Because right there we missed 3. So those are 3 that we own but are under the Central Wappinger Water Improvement.
And we can just add those to that, that
Yes.
list there. I mean, I'm not concerned over that. We've identified the named parks. The only thing I would change is Mark C. Palmetier 9/11 Memorial Park instead of Palmetier Park.
Okay.
Mark C. Palmetier 9/11 Memorial Park would be that. What about Chelsea Boat Ramp? Should that be listed as a park?
Should be,
I would think so.
in case it would get assigned.
Yeah, I don't know if it meets the definition of park under the statute, but it is, I don't know.
We did receive grant funding from the state parks recreation, so I guess it could be determined as a park.
I mean, personally,
Yeah.
I think it's a recreation area, right?
Yep.
So under
Yes.
171.2, it should be listed, Chelsea
I
Boat Ramp.
I guess the other question is, do we have any separate rules for the boat ramp?
Yeah, there's one rule, at your own risk.
Would that conflict with the voting part that's in there?
Well,
It says unless otherwise authorized, right?
Yep. Yep. I'd say let's add it.
so is Sergeant Mark C. Palmetier,
9/11 Memorial Park.
9/11
That's the official
Memorial.
title. Sergeant Mark C. Palmetier, 9/11 Memorial Park. Chelsea Boat Ramp, or is it Carthage Landing? No, I'm just kidding. What was it before that? Wasn't it
Low
another?
Point,
Low Point, right?
Low Point, Carthage Landing, and Chelsea. The sign at Chelsea says Chelsea Boat Ramp.
Chelsea on Hudson?
Okay, any other comments to this?
All right, so we'll make that,
So we need a motion, we didn't have a motion yet, I believe.
so we'll just adjourn this to the next meeting, we'll make
Yeah,
those changes
motion
and
to-
we'll
to
adopt it.
adjourn.
We'll adopt it at
Keep
the
it table.
November
Keep it
5th,
begin.
November 5th meeting.
All right, so I'll move to table with,
I'll
with
second
the
it.
changes, I guess, for future
Yeah.
adoption.
Yep.
And then once we.
There's a motion, second, all in
sorry.
favor?
Aye. Once
Nays or
once we officially promulgate this, or even, once we have everything in place, that's when Joey and Jim need to make sure that the language on the signs, which look great, are 100% consistent with the adopted section.
I just got the updated one tonight, so we'll make those changes.
I mean, some of the, you're gonna have to obviously shorten some of the things, right?
Oh, yeah.
But just make sure everybody's on the same
Right.
page there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to Resolution 2020-162. This is a resolution adopting final benefit assessment rules for special improvement districts and special improvement areas for fiscal year 2021. Do I have a motion?
So this one is the one we're gonna table.
I know. We have a motion to table.
So move.
Okay, second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passes. Next one is Resolution 2020-163. This is a resolution adopting capital budgets, O&M charges, and water sewer rates and rents for special districts and special improvement areas for fiscal year 2021. Do I have a resolution?
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passes. And next item is related to the, budget, Resolution 2020-164. This is a resolution approving preliminary budget for fiscal year 2021 and directing a public hearing thereon. And that hearing would be November 5th.
Correct.
Right, so
I'll
the
make that motion.
resolution should be changed to reflect the November 5th public hearing date rather than November 9th as is printed in the original.
7 PM, correct?
Yes,
Yep.
unless you desire a different time.
Keep it,
No, 7's
keep
good.
it the same for now.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. The next item is that, Tim and I and Scott have been discussing, and I've had discussions with Ann Saylor with respect to CDBG money, which is going to be available this year, or for next year, I guess, when it's issued. And we were looking at different projects, and we came up with some renovations out at Carnwath, which would be really for a recreation space, for possible senior space down on the first floor, also getting the chapel ready. Grant money, depending on how we phrase it, could be anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000. I have this resolution not really to vote on to really table tonight, but I wanted to hand out to you so then we could look at it. And we also have to have a public hearing, so we could do that on the 5th. This is chart, this has the slides concerning the CDBG grant and also a proposal that I and Joey have done all the legwork, for, put together. So not to discuss it really tonight, but for you all to read it, and then we can consider it at the 5th meeting, is what I intend to do with it, since there's a lot here to be digested. But CDBG, we've gone through that before the process and gotten monies, and now there's monies that we think we could get, or if there's some other project that we would like to consider, then we can consider that as well.
No objection.
Any other questions?
I have a cartoon if you
Yeah,
want to
go
walk
ahead.
through
Yeah.
some of the
Yeah,
ideas.
go ahead,
there. So-
because it's, Tim and Tom were out there, looking at the area. I took actually a walking tour, so this is some ideas that, fit within the guidelines of CDBG.
So again, it's CDBG ADA, so we're looking at the number one priority is getting ADA access to the building. There's two concepts. We'll call it phase one would be to convert the basement of the chapel to a senior citizen area. And what we're trying to do now is just run through cost order of magnitude estimates to try to figure out which is the most can-do solution. Phase two would be to convert under the sports museum to make more of a community center. And what we're looking at in this concept would be to improve ADA parking in the existing lot. We create an ADA accessible walkway. Dick, this is a different idea than what we talked about in the field, but
Sure.
it's basically kind of circumvents the grade. When we're looking at the contours, the elevation of the
Sure.
parking lot, believe it or not, is almost equal to the elevation of those doors. So
Okay.
we're kind of like, maybe it's easier to
Sure,
to
yeah.
grade a path. So this,
Rather than the other side.
rather than, so, but then, if you go, Joey, to, the next slide was alternate two. We looked at, having to create new ADA parking adjacent to this area by the chapel, and then maybe having a mechanical lift. That's with the green area, there's some landings there. It's a lot more involved, believe it or not, than just kind of like when we were out there waving it around. And then, so there's the area in the middle there by the sports museum that would need to be upgraded for accessibility. And then it's the same area on both there, so it doesn't matter. But
So
and
you,
then-
So the grant monies basically can cover ADA, as we know. They can cover renovation, actually knocking out walls and doing some things of that nature, and also, for a senior, type of, activities. And then within the context of a town, program and building, those all fit within the CDBG, program. And, arguably too, since Chelsea is considered to be lower income, we, like we did with, up at Robinson, we were able to work in that so we can meet, if we're able to meet all 4 criteria, then it could be upwards to $150,000 would be the grants. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Al.
No, so I was just gonna ask, so, if we get, say, the minimum of $100,000, you can do, what can you do, what phase, like phase 1?
Well, it's not
phase
gonna
2, is
cover
it-
everything right now. I mean, so this is the exterior for access. So what
Okay.
we're looking at is a can-do. And really the simplest approach is on the south side, which is that little bump out. And Joey, can you move the mouse there on the south side of the sports museum?
Right.
There's some easy fixes to get access into that end of the building. Once you're in that, there's an accessible hallway that goes through an old kitchen and then into this proposed community room. So we're weighing options right now. It's minor interior expenses to
Right.
put heat and things in there rather than to do all the expensive outdoor.
And then you can do the bathrooms, there's 3 bathroom facilities that can be modified for that, so, and, some of this in words is, covered within, the document I gave you, but we're working with CPL to refine this
Yeah.
significantly.
Our initial code review shows we just need 1 unisex ADA
Right.
bathroom, and we're thinking it could be, by the elevator, that actual bathroom. And we would just kind of clean up and fix up all the other existing bathrooms. We're trying to keep it as simple as possible to get, some functional use.
There are some walls that can be knocked out, and one area in particular in the community room that, again, this could cover.
So dealing with Scott Williams, I guess we need to set a public hearing.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and then from
We
there.
we'll have to do it at the November 5th meeting,
Right.
based
So
on the timeline that's in.
The resolution tonight can be to, actually table this, what was proposal, but then to call a public hearing
Right.
and to do that all on the
Now, as
5th.
it says in the handout, but the purpose of the public hearing is technically so that any entity from the public who
Right.
wishes to piggyback in essence on our
Yeah.
application or bring their own application would have an ability to do so.
Which
So-
we've done before with our previous CDBG.
Sure, and
applications.
we've had, input from other, entities, and maybe that might be, some potential here, looking at, I think the sports museum is a separate entity.
It is.
And actually,
so-
there was input in public hearing that went back to 2007 timeframe, right, that went into the original Carnwath plan too. There is
Right,
a
so
lot of
I'm-
history there.
I'm just
so-
saying that to
Yeah.
the extent that you
Yeah.
show that you're cooperating with other entities,
Right.
Friends of Cordwath is another entity. So, those are things you can kind of put on the application. I mean, technically, if, some, church group wanted to build a soup kitchen in a,
Well, we
they
had,
have the ability to come to the public hearing and say, this is
Yeah.
what we're pitching, but,
And we've had a number of outside non-for-profit organizations interested.
Correct.
Even, we've talked to some members of the Board of Trustees of the Village Wappingers Falls, for doing a greater shared services initiative.
Yep.
So this is, the CBG grant, but then obviously more funding would be
Sure.
on the way from other agencies and so forth.
but right now, and we've gotten other general interest in that, but use the CDBG
I'm
as
just
the
saying
anchor, right, to
if we get,
do it.
the greater number of groups we could get on
Yep.
board between now and the 5th is.
Yes.
Of course. Well,
Ideal, I got it.
Yeah. Yep, well, that's the idea.
So I do have a question for you. So you assume some level of revenue in the budget today. This
Yeah.
is independent, so this would be.
No, well, this would trigger that revenue.
Okay,
this
Okay,
would ask-
very low level of revenue based, and then that's in this document.
Okay.
That you have, okay?
All right.
So the board members, you can look at
Okay.
it, so it's there, very basic.
okay.
Because actually, this can be far more than that revenue stream.
Okay.
But I put in a very conservative number until we see where it is.
So
Okay.
there's a letter of intent due to the county by November 13th, and then the grant applications
Yeah,
due
December
December 1st.
first.
So those are our
Right.
time frames.
So the resolution then to substitute this would be to call a public hearing, Jim?
Yeah, so I have the resolutions that were drafted from last time, so
Right.
I'll get that over to the town
Right.
clerk.
Well, yeah, basically, all right, you know, we can actually, the one that I have.
Okay.
At that time, no, at that time, this one we had here, we would
Right,
add the
we-
public hearing, that would be the final.
Correct.
Resolution. So, you know, have a motion to approve a public hearing for consideration of this, and then at the board meeting, then we would also discuss it further. Have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. Yeah, thank you. But I think it's a good opportunity if we could, you know, capture it. Resolution 2020-166 is to approve the correspondence law.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, motion passed. Any other items for special consideration, new business, before we go into executive session?
30 seconds.
Yes.
Barbara Birdie, thank you very much for your assistance. Supervisor Thurston, Bruce Flower, Planning Board Chair, and the individuals that have been assisting the Fowler House residents with those field changes to the site plan relative to the berm and fencing and screening. Greatly appreciate you all coming out. I think, Barbara, I think you were on vacation, I'm pretty sure, when you came out. I'm not sure you were in the office, you had no way. Right, so you were off, and you came out on a Friday at 4:30 in the afternoon, which I didn't even expect you to be there, but again, you've gone above and beyond, and greatly appreciate that. So we're gonna get that impact minimized on those residents, and standing in a backyard looking at things is a lot easier than looking at a map and a site plan, and they greatly appreciated it, so I do too, thank you.
Yep, same here. Thanks. Any other comments, Al or Chris? Okay, I have a motion to move in executive session to consider HR personnel matters.
And to discuss litigation.
Yes, that's right, thank you for the reminder. There's a motion, second?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Nays or abstentions, seeing none, motion passed. Okay, we'll break, go into executive session, and be back. Thank you.